The views and opinions expressed by the individuals in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of its producers, Metaphor Creative Media, its management, or affiliates.
As police officers, we're witness to some of the most amazing things in life. Some comical, some horrendous, and some just plain miraculous. When asked why you went into law enforcement, most officers will tell you, because it's like having a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. Today, we saved you a front row seat. This is Copservations.
From Broadcast Beat Studios in Oakland Park, Florida, Metaphor Creative Media presents a show that gives you a personal glimpse of what law enforcement officers see and do in their typical and not so typical day of work. From walking the beat to detective, Rob has 35 years of law enforcement experience. Although the staff are all active or former law enforcement, any views, opinions, and all other show content are in no way official views, statements, or policies of any law enforcement agency. To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677.
Hello again, and welcome to Copservations, your front row seat to the greatest show on earth. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Anthony. I'm one of the show's creators and producers. Tonight we thought we'd have Rob back. But unfortunately, something else came up yesterday, and he had to get that taken care of right away. So, once again, you'll be sitting here listening to me, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to think about it. Joined tonight by the show's co-host and Rob's partner in crime, Gary Dickinson. Gary, thanks for being here tonight.
Hey, bud, how you doing?
And unfortunately, you got to put up with me again one more
night.
One more episode, but we did good last week. I think
we did.
We'll get over it. As has been the case the past couple of episodes, having to host the show unfortunately provides me the opportunity to sit here, but rips me from the comfort of the control room where Danny is. Hi, Danny.
It's way more comfortable without you in here.
Oh, already. We just started the show. We're not 2 minutes in, and he's already. On the other hand, it makes things kind of fun because Danny has to do triple the work while we purposely try to drive him crazy. Right, Gary? We could do that tonight.
Cool.
Yep, absolutely.
Best thing about it is we get to watch and laugh through these huge glass viewing windows that I installed a while ago as it all unfolds. In case you didn't know, our show is broadcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Copservations Facebook page, a YouTube channel, and now the Copservations Twitter page at Copservations_. From the Broadcast Beat Studios located in Oakland Park, Florida. And here on Copservations, we attempt to give you a personal glimpse of what law enforcement officers go through on a daily basis. We'll also talk about recent events, happenings, and the latest hot topics pertaining to law enforcement that not only affects officers, but you, the general public, as well. Whoop. If you have, there's one of those glitches things with the controlling of the teleprompter, which is always fun. If you have any comments, questions, or a story you'd like to share, join the conversation by giving the podcast studio a call toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. And you can also instant message your questions and comments live on our Facebook page, the Copservations Facebook page. Make sure you instant message. Don't comment on the page in the comment section. Send us an instant message, and we'll try to answer them live on the broadcast tonight. Before we start tonight's show, we want to let our listeners know that we're going to be off the next week for the Thanksgiving holiday, as well as some show planning, upgrading, preparations, and advances for the future show expansion, which we're planning on doing, which is really cool. It's pretty exciting. We're also thinking that the Christmas holiday, with that approaching quickly, it might have some scheduling conflicts. So we'll work that out, and we'll make some decisions as to when the best date is to resume regularly scheduled broadcasting. We'll keep you posted. So keep checking back with us on all of our social media pages, and we'll let you know. And plus, that should give Rob plenty of time to get back up to full speed and back on the air. What do you think?
No more excuses.
Yeah, I've given him a full, like, almost month to finish up whatever he's got to do, and then he's got to come back. I think
we
Gary's
need him.
Gary's getting tired of me. Otherwise, I'm going to have Danny do these promos where they say, "Now back to Anthony," instead of "Now back to Rob."
I don't think you want me to do that.
No, okay. Yeah, I definitely don't. I don't want to be sitting here if I don't have to. We're going to have to force Gary. Gary, if this happens again, you're it, bud.
I'll host the show.
You're it. You're
No
it.
problem.
Okay. So last week,
Just don't be on your phone the whole time.
No, I want a pay raise.
remember when we thought he was sleeping that one time when he first came? Remember that, Gary?
Yeah, and I was reading the thing that Rob was. He kept trying to get my attention. I'm going, what? What's about?
It was funny. We thought he was sleeping on the job. Last week's topic was interacting with the police, where Gary and I talked about police officers interacting with the public during certain circumstances, and the public's interaction and reactions during contact or certain encounters with police officers. If you missed last week's episode, interacting with the police, or any of our other episodes, you can catch up on the show by watching Copservations on the Copservations podcast channel, located on our Metaphor Creative Media YouTube page. And that's where you'll find all of our previous episodes. Some of them are pretty amusing, especially Richie's. I love Richie's. Tonight's topic is law enforcement's battle with drugs and the addiction epidemic. Our guest is a retired criminal investigator, instructor, and supervisor for the U.S. Department of for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency. He's a former police officer with the Deerfield Beach Police Department and sergeant with the Broward County Sheriff's Office. He's also a keynote speaker on personal security and author of 2 books and a private investigator. Our guest is Gary Coffman. Gary, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Gary and I, we have the pleasure of knowing each other, not necessarily in this forum, but Gary and I go back a little ways, and we met up in part of a production group where you would do live reads of screenplays that were people brought to the table, and we were part of a group where you would do these live screenplays. And Gary and I think we had decided maybe we wanted to do something a little bit different, and we tried to split off and do our own thing, but you got busy with your...
Well, you'd produced a couple of very good episodes that I'd seen, and I thought maybe we could do something together, but then this business just took off. And
Right.
it's been swamped ever since, so...
Thanks for that. I appreciate that.
Well, tonight, me and him are going to take over the show.
Oh, that's fine.
We're going to
because,
call it Gary and Gary.
There you go, G&G, and then I can go. I guess finish eating my last wing. Or I'm just kidding. But Gary, you know, I knew you when I met you. You explained to me briefly, you know, your background and stuff. But you know, after reading your background, I mean, your bio, it's quite a resume you got going there.
I've been lucky. I've been very blessed. I don't take any of that for granted. It's been quite a wild ride. So,
very good. Yeah, it's very impressive. It's a very impressive background, and you've traveled obviously all around, and it's like I said, very good background. Very impressive. As is custom with the show's format, I'd like to touch some recent events and news pertaining to law enforcement, and then discuss these events a little bit more in depth for just a bit before we move on to tonight's topic. First up is a story out of Florida. Like they say, they don't call it Florida for nothing. It kind of fits tonight's topic, and so I'll touch on this. I'll touch on a couple of stories, and then we'll go back and we'll review them in more detail. 380-pound Florida man used his belly button to stash a bag of meth. The man was arrested early Saturday after he reportedly showed up to a McDonald's in Clearwater with a drug-filled needle. Investigators arrived and found a 28-gauge needle on the man, and he was charged with possession of methamphetamines. In another story in Georgia, Richmond County deputy was shot and killed Tuesday night while conducting a routine patrol with a narcotics unit in Augusta. The deputy investigator, Cecil Ridley, was fatally injured at a gas station at 8:30 p.m. after officers encountered several people at an Augusta Mart gas station when gunfire erupted. An officer from inside the store and a third officer in the parking lot returned fire, striking the gunman, and he was taken to the hospital where he is being treated. And finally, in Miami-Dade, back to Florida again, this is a pretty touching story that we'll talk about a little. A homeless father approached officers at a bus depot and got more than he had asked for. He told the officers that his wife, and 4 children had recently moved from Michigan in hopes of him finding a job as a cook, but the family had been kicked out of a relative's home and had nowhere to go. The family of 6 headed to the bus depot with everything that they own in garbage bags, where the officers made some calls and found a local shelter and a room for the family, which was pretty neat. I love stories like that.
They probably got him a job too after that.
You never know. You never know. So let's dig a little further into those stories. The 380-pound man who used his belly button to stash a bag of meth. Martin Skelly.
Doesn't make him a bad person.
No. Martin Skelly, 41, of St. Petersburg, was busted early Saturday after he reportedly showed up to a McDonald's in Clearwater with a drug-filled needle.
Why didn't he use it?
I don't know.
A drug-filled. Why don't you shoot the stuff? Get it over with.
Maybe he took part and was saving part for later.
Was it a crime?
Maybe.
I didn't know we couldn't bring drug-filled needles into McDonald's. All right. I never seen a sign. I mean, I saw no smoking, no shoes, no service, but no needles.
You'd think that would go unstated. It doesn't necessarily need to be. You'd hope, anyway.
I saw a sign on a bar one time said "No shoes, no service, no shit." Sorry, I just lost my head.
So investigators went to the scene and they found a 28-gauge needle on Skelly. He was charged and arrested for possession of methamphetamine. Police searched Skelly before he was booked at the Pinellas County Jail. Before he was transported, authorities had asked Skelly if he had any more contraband on him, and warning him that he could face additional charges if more drugs were found on him at the jail. Skelly said no, the affidavit said. And I'm all white. It doesn't matter. So,
Want me to read it from here?
No, I got it.
Okay,
That's good.
I got it on my phone, so
I think that's the end of it anyway. Is it?
yeah, that's when you thought I was falling asleep.
Anyway, I don't need your assistance, Danny. Thank you.
Too bad.
The methamphetamine's in the belly button. I mean, I don't think I've ever had a prisoner try to hide contraband in their belly button.
That's because you never arrested a guy with 380 pounds.
Well,
Can you imagine how much he was hanging over his belt? I mean, I'm just saying.
That couldn't have been pleasant. Yeah,
could you imagine the guy that had to
do that search.
How did you know to search that? I mean,
well, cracks and crevices, but like I say, you talk about an unpleasant job.
you're talking about a bag, a little baggie of it. I mean,
Well, I don't know. Maybe he told him to jump up and down until it fell out. I don't know.
Well, we've all arrested people and found contraband stashed in
well, sure, like
unpleasant places, but the belly button, that's a first, I believe.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know how sensitive your belly button is when you stick your finger in there and try to clean lint out and stuff, don't? I mean, you get that tickly feeling. I mean,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Here's a question for you. Yeah, that's too much information.
Yeah, really.
Here's a question
TMI.
for you. Yeah, way past TMI. Here's a question for you. I wonder if the meth in the belly button has the same negative consequences that a smuggler swallower has when the balloon bursts. We've all...
You mean if it actually makes contact? Because technically, I mean...
Yeah. I mean, he could absorb it through the skin, kill him right on the spot. Hypothetically.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, but there's more of a chance in the intestines because
I would think.
the
Yeah.
the degrading of the material, and then
Have you ever seen them die from like cocaine in their intestines?
no.
Oh, Bud, it's not a pretty sight.
No, it's not pleasant.
No, I remember actually having to go to a hospital because I think they called them mules. Actually had ingested like 7 or 9 condoms full of coke.
Yep.
And they actually had to pass them. And I thought that's the craziest thing that I ever heard of.
Yeah, well, if they break before they pass them, that's all she wrote.
It's done right there on the spot.
Finished.
That's crazy, though.
Dirt, dead right there.
They start having
DRT,
seizures
yeah.
and everything
DRT.
else. It's like quick.
Yeah, I heard something about that. I mean, I don't know. It's just very weird. So we'll move on to the next story in Georgia, which is, I hate hearing these stories, and they're just getting way too often, and almost daily we're seeing something about officers being attacked or shot and killed. But a Richmond County deputy was shot and killed Tuesday night while conducting a routine patrol on a narcotics unit. With a narcotics unit in Augusta. The deputy investigator, Cecil Ridley, was fatally injured at a gas station on the corner of 12th Street and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Sergeant William McCarthy with the Richmond County Sheriff's Office told reporters. Ridley was conducting proactive patrols to curb gun violence, go figure, in the area, which began last week. McCarthy said gunfire erupted about 8:30 p.m. after officers encountered several people at the Augusta Mart gas station. Ridley's suspected shooter was identified by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation as 24-year-old Alvin Theodore Hester Jr. According to the GBI, another officer first tried to confront Hester inside the gas station, and Hester turned to leave. He allegedly shot Ridley as he was walking through the front doors. GBI Special Agent in Charge, Pat Morgan, said in the news release the other officer returned fire as Hester continued out into the parking lot where he was confronted again. Both the officer from inside the store and an officer in the parking lot fired at him, striking him. Ridley, who was unable to return fire, later died of his injuries, and Hester was taken to Augusta University Medical Center where he was undergoing treatment Wednesday morning. Officer Ridley, 51 years old, is the third Georgia law enforcement officer killed by gunfire in 2019 and the 7th to die in the line of duty. And nationally, he is the 108th officer killed in the line of duty this year, according to the Officer Down Memorial page, which tracks law enforcement deaths in the U.S. It's unclear how long Ridley worked at the sheriff's office, but he received awards in 2018 for 5 years of service. Governor Brian Kemp took to Twitter to offer his condolences and asked Georgians to join us in praying Investigator Ridley's loved ones. He gave his life to protect and serve, as we all do. Well, we don't give our lives, but we all do it to protect and serve. That's why we took the job. And losing him in the line of duty is heartbreaking, Kemp said. May God give his community comfort in this difficult time. And the Tuesday night incident is the 77th officer-involved shooting investigation that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation has opened this year, and the second one this week. Our hearts are with the family, blood and blue, of Investigator Cecil Ridley, who paid the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty, the state agency said in a tweet. We thank you for your service and will continue to pray for your family, friends, and the Richmond County Sheriff's Office. I know you guys are feeling the same thing. I don't need to say it or ask you how you feel, because we all feel.
It's just tragic and unnecessary. And as we, go on through the show, we're going to talk more about the fact that situations like this emerge out of the violent environment that open-air drug markets created 20, 30 years ago. And the violence that's going on in all these major metropolitan areas is a direct result of the drug epidemics that this country has gone through. Tragic and unnecessary. I pray for his family.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, nobody even worries about the consequences anymore. I mean, there is no. I don't want to say law enforcement almost doesn't mean anything to anybody anymore, but it's like, do you not think about that when? I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's happening almost every day.
Well, worse.
What's getting in the minds of these people where they think it's okay to get out, confront officers, whether it's whether you have an issue with it, them pulling you over or whatever it is, you confront them. When we're there doing our job. I mean,
Well, the fact of the matter is we're regarded as the enemy. Because we're in those neighborhoods making drug arrests, we're making gun arrests, we're seen as the enemy. And it's unfortunate, but it's a cultural thing. I'm afraid I don't know how we're going to come back from it, to tell you the truth. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people on this topic, and don't even get me started on the deterioration of Western society, but when law enforcement loses the respect of the community that they serve, we can no longer go into those neighborhoods and enforce the law, then somebody's going to take those neighborhoods over.
Right.
It's going to be the criminals.
right.
But
Well, I have right here, 106 officers you said were 109 line of duty deaths this year.
Right.
Line of duty deaths last year was 166. To be honest with you, I thought the 109 was going to be a lot higher. Of course, the year's not over yet.
Right.
I know that might sound ridiculous, but if you look at this, the line of duty deaths in 2019, and this is can you get this? Oh my.
Danny?
I don't know if you can get this, but
Yeah, give me a second.
well, let me throw another. wrinkle in.
most deaths were by gunfire. Next thing was auto, and then the last category is other. And according to this graph, gunfire is a lot higher this year compared to the other years because the others have caught up to the gunfire line.
Right.
Does
Here
it
we
mention,
go.
Does it mention how many ambushes involved? That's one of the things has to be factored into it. The fact of the matter is, a lot of the line of duty deaths from gunfire
Right.
were the result of ambushes of the police officers.
Exactly.
Yeah, last year was a very bad year for that. If I remember, last year
It
was a very
was.
bad year. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, and Gary is a survivor of his brother's life was taken by a criminal also. And back then, when it occurred, not that it makes it any better, but back then when it happened, it was an outrage. I mean, it didn't happen every day back then, And when it did happen, I mean, it was first of all, because it was unheard of. It was very shocking to the community, and everybody was, And now, it's like when it happens. Oh, so a cop was shot. I mean, I'm just
becoming old hat now.
It is.
But back in '89 when my brother was killed, it was on the news for well over a week, all day. I mean, every news thing in Palm Beach County was about him and what happened and the guy that did it. And
Right.
they went on. I mean, and they really paid. I have to say, the news media paid a nice tribute to my brother back in those days. I don't know if they do that now, but
Yeah, but still, like I said, back then, it was very shocking to. I mean, even to me. I mean, when you heard about it, you would stop and think. Now, it's like an everyday occurrence, and it's like Gary said, it's like an old hat. It's like, all right, a cop was shot. Let's move on. It's almost like it's not a big deal anymore with the.
And I hate to say it, but it's almost that way with us. But when I see, most of I get my notifications on Facebook, and because of my brother, and I think it affects me more. But I just make a sad face. I don't even write anything that much because I just write the same stuff over and over, and it's heartbreaking for me to see, especially these young cops with the young family and babies and kids, and the wife's that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very commonplace, like my sister just said on there. It is. It's very, very commonplace. It's, and like you said, Gary, I mean, even we're becoming numb to it, which is a shame.
Which is a real shame.
It's really a shame. So, and here you have a guy who's out there specifically fighting the gun violence and going out there to target it, and ends up getting taken down by the same exact thing that he's.
Well, I hate to say it, but that's inevitable. We go into these neighborhoods to try to enforce the drug laws, enforce the gun laws, try to stop the violence, and we'll go into it more in the show. But, that's what we're there for, is to try to do some good.
Yeah,
but unfortunately,
absolutely.
there's going to be casualties.
That's why I'm so glad you're here tonight, because this is going to be a big discussion. The connection, the drugs. Things are getting so out of control with the drugs and the opioid addictions and all this other stuff. So I'm glad you came. I really am very glad that you came down. Gary came down from
Titusville.
I know, he
for
told
the
me.
show tonight, which is awesome. I can't thank him enough.
I can't get guys to walk across the street and listen to me. But
That's 'cause
I'm grateful for the invitation, guys.
I was going to throw a joke in there, but I lost the opportunity. Go ahead, Gary.
It's part of what we were saying and what he said too. Is, I don't want to get into the politics, but look at Chicago. 90% of that is drug related, I'm sure. Most of it is gang members. They're a huge murder rate there.
Yeah,
Every
they do.
weekend, dozens of people are getting murdered and killed and shot and wounded, and the cops up there are just fighting their butts off for almost nothing.
Yeah.
And then they will not ask the president for help. And the only way to really get this under control is to send in, I don't know who, the FBI, someone to go in there. But they can't. They talked about sending in the National Guard. You're going to take these guys off the street? You can't do that. They'll get killed, murdered.
That's not the reason.
But somebody has to go in and help Chicago. But God forbid they were to ask for help from the federal government.
I know, it's crazy. Anyway, last story before we move on. In Florida again, this is a nice story. It's not an uncommon sight. A man down on his luck asking for help at a city bus depot. People might avoid him or give him some spare change. Either way, he's often treated with suspicion. And recently, a homeless man approached several Miami-Dade police officers who routinely patrol a travel hub near the city's airport. And the situation played out much differently. He told the officers that he and his wife and 4 children had recently moved from Michigan in hopes of him finding a job as a cook. But the family had been kicked out of a relative's home. With nowhere to go, the family of 6 headed to the bus depot with all their belongings in plastic bags. I saw his wife holding a 2-month-old. I saw the other kids and just immediately thought to myself, wow, we have to help them, Officer Jose De Leon recalled. De Leon and fellow officers Roberto Azcoy, Isabel Soto, Dwayne Wilhelm, and Scott McBath, all moms and dads themselves, reached into their pockets and came up with nearly $200 to help the family. We've all done things like this. I know I've done that several times in my career. And even that little bit, brings a little bit of joy to us.
You're doing some good.
Being a new mother herself, Willem couldn't fathom a newborn sleeping in the bus station. I had just taken out the money that morning, and I just gave it all up, Willem said, through tears. But the officers didn't stop there. After giving the family money from their pockets, they made some calls and found a local shelter with room for the family of 6. The police officers even drove them there. It took 3 units to carry everybody and their belongings, McBath said. The man and his wife were extremely grateful and expressed their gratitude, the officers said. The family eventually made it back to Michigan with the money from the officers and assistance from the shelter. The officers who regularly patrol Miami-Dade in the international airport area and have a combined 80 years of law enforcement experience said that they see themselves as city ambassadors as well as cops. I don't think any of us here consider ourselves heroes, Ascoy said. We're doing our job. At the end of the day, that's what we signed up for. That's what we swore to do. To do right in the community, which is what we all signed up to do when we took the job.
So, shameless plug, one of the books I wrote was Getting Started in Law Enforcement, A Career That Counts. And one of the lines in the book is, there's 100,000 episodes across this country every day where police officers engage somebody in need and they do good quietly. It doesn't make the press. It betters one life or two lives at a
Right.
time, and no fanfare involved. But there's hundreds of thousands of episodes like that per week where officers are out in the street doing the right thing and taking care of people. But unfortunately, that's not what makes the media these days. It's only when a police officer makes a mistake.
Right, and we don't do that because it's not that we expect that to happen.
We
We're
don't
doing
do
it
it for
just
a
so
pat
we
on the
get
back.
the pat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We don't
the pat
even
on the
tell
back.
anybody most of the time.
Right.
No one knows no one's the wiser about it having happened.
Yeah.
We just do what, and like I say, hundreds of thousands of episodes like that every day, across this country.
Every day. I mean, we had a guest the last two shows. Hamsey, he bought a trick airfare for a trip back to Jamaica for a woman who was just trying to get home. I mean, really? I mean, the thing is, like I said, we're not looking for the pat on the back. What we are looking for is for people to understand that during that one time that somebody happens to have a bad day or the bad apple is exposed in our career, we get a break. It's not all of us. It happens everywhere. There are bad apples in every profession. So we just ask that we all not be tied to the one bad apple or the bad day when somebody's having a bad day or and that's all it is. Yeah. I saw this.
Well, I got to say one more thing. A shout out to my old mentor, Captain Lee Magnuson from Deerfield Police Department. My first year on the job, way back in the day, Christmas time rolls around, no fanfare, no big deal. At the time, West Deerfield was basically agricultural, and
Yeah.
there was a couple of migrant camps out there.
Yeah, you're right. The Pompano Labor Campus in Pompano.
Same thing. And Captain Magnuson brought this big box, toys and some food and whatever. He says, Coffman, drive this out to the migrant. There's 8 or 10 migrant sheds out there people lived in. And, he wasn't looking for any recognition
Right,
for that.
right.
That was his way of reaching out to the community. And that tradition, like I say, I think has been going on for a long time.
It's a lot of the things we do is just because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly.
That's why we do it.
Exactly.
So that there's no underlying,
Motive or
motive. Yep.
intentions.
It's just because it's the right thing to do. And
I'll go a step further. I think that's what keeps most of us on the job. For all the negative stuff that goes on, getting a chance to help somebody, getting a chance to do some
Yeah.
good is what keeps you in there for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I would say so. Right, Gary?
Yep. Yeah.
He's got his nose buried in his
I was
podium.
thinking of something funny, but I'm not going to say it.
Only because we're on too warm of a
Too warm and fuzzy.
level.
No,
Come
I
on,
know.
man. Give it.
No, I just don't want to say it in public.
Okay, well, we'll say it when we go to break because now I want to hear.
Yeah, I got to hear that. too.
As
I
a
forgot what it
reminder,
was.
if you have a comment, question, or a story you'd like to share, join the conversation by giving the podcast studio a call toll free. No money. Doesn't cost you a dime. Well, it doesn't. We don't spend dimes anymore anyway.
No,
right?
call in on the phone, somebody,
Yeah.
please.
Somebody just call.
Break this
Just
up a little
dial.
bit.
Just say
A
hello.
couple of weeks here I've been here. No calls. Come on.
I think maybe it's because of you because we used to get calls back then.
I know. Maybe it is. Tell Tina to call.
She's still good. I'm telling you, when she comes here, she's gonna get you for last week.
I love her.
But it's everything has changed since you started. My kids don't show up no more. Danny's wearing 3 hats in there, right, Danny?
Maybe I better.
Rob
No.
gets.
I
It's
need
not
a
that.
raise.
Rob's been out. Ever since that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
maybe
just
everybody
crazy.
wants to
Yeah.
stay away from me. No.
No, I'm just playing with you. We love you, Gary. You know that. So anyway, just give the podcast studio a call at toll-free 888-511-COPS, 888-511-2677. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll get into tonight's topic, law enforcement's battle with drugs and the addiction epidemic with our host, Gary Coffman over there. So stay there. We'll be right back.
If you or someone you know would like to appear as a guest on the show, you can book your appearance on the Copservations Facebook page, or you can email the show directly at copservations@yahoo.com.
Bye-bye.
Hi. Hoping for a crisp breeze to help keep you alert. Oh, he took a sip of water too. That'll probably help. You were probably gonna turn down the radio too, so you could focus, right?
Probably okay isn't okay.
Right.
If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend.
I think the water line is what really drove it home. I blew on him. Hi, I'm a warning sign. I let people know when they're... Oh, gotta go.
I'll be right back.
Hi.
I surrender.
All right, pal. Get ready for the day, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's that?
Do we have a gun?
Why do you ask that, kiddo?
Can I play with it?
No, absolutely not. It's not a toy. You know that.
Do I? I bet it looks like one.
Yeah, well, it's not. Anyway, I need it to protect you, your sister and Mom.
From what?
From bad guys, like on TV.
But what about the 8 kids who get shot every day by mistake? Their daddies probably thought they were safe too.
Where'd you hear that?
TV.
Yeah, well, maybe we don't believe everything we hear on TV.
Where do you keep it?
It's hidden.
I bet it's on the top shelf of the closet, under your sweatshirts. Is it loaded?
It's not. I keep the
In
bullets.
the boots with the red laces, and the chest beside the bed? I haven't found them yet, but I'm sure I can. You always told me to be curious. Remember when I found my Christmas gift? I'm a good climber, you know.
No, that's not what I meant. Look, I need to be ready if someone breaks in.
What about when it's just me and Mom? You taught me to be brave. I could use the gun to protect her.
No, Justin, I promise. I'll teach you how to handle a gun when you're old enough.
And what if I don't make it to old enough? I could get bullied and decide it's too much for me. It would be so easy with our gun.
Our gun? No, buddy. My gun.
But it is our gun, in our home. Happens all the time.
I'll make sure that doesn't happen. I'm always here for you.
But Dad, you're not always here.
Today, with seasonal temperatures, we should reach our normal high of about 82 degrees by this afternoon. Clear skies tonight with a low near 70. Increasing cloudiness tomorrow, sticky and humid with a high of 36. With the winds out of the east.
To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. Now back to our host.
Welcome back to Copservations. Tonight's discussion is law enforcement's battle with drugs and the addiction epidemic with our guest and former DEA agent, Gary Coffman. Gary, before we move into the topic, which is a very big one, and I know you're, with your history and everything, I know how much it means to you to get this topic out and discuss it. Before we do that, we like to know, get to know our guests. So I hope you don't mind, but we're going to ask you a few questions first.
That's fine.
Introduce you to the audience. Let them know who you are.
Yeah,
I know who you are.
Take your fingerprints and quick,
Yeah.
picture, but
Facial recognition, run me through the databases, yeah, exactly all that.
Been there, done that. Oh, we know that guy. That's Gary. Wow. So, if there was a prior to, what did you do prior to getting into law enforcement?
I got to be honest with you, there wasn't much of a prior to. I knew I wanted to be a cop when I was 16. I started off as an explorer at Pompano PD, rode with them until I graduated high school. Got a job at 20 with Deerfield Police Department like you, starting off as a dispatcher, actually answering phones on the midnight shift. And I did that for a couple of years, late 70s. I'm not going to date myself, but at some point I got put in a police academy, and the rest, as they say, is history. I've been doing this for a very long time. I still love it. I still believe in it, and so that's how I got my start. I knew early on what I wanted to do.
So you knew very early on, but why was there like were you like just curious, or were you mesmerized?
It's hard to tell. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it was kind of an epiphany. Prior to my 16th birthday, nobody would have foreseen that I was going to go into law enforcement.
Or mine.
They might have suspected other vocations, in fact. No one else in my family's ever been a cop.
That was my next question. Nobody? No.
I'm the first, And
what was your interaction with police prior to you knowing that you wanted to, did you ever have any, or?
Well, I had several interactions with the police. That was part of the problem.
And so,
so in point of fact, thinking back on it, that probably greatly influenced my decision to get into police work.
Wow.
I'm trying to remember his name. Old school Pompano cop. He kind of kept track of me and my little gang, and every time he'd see us out on the street, he'd call us over and whatever. But not in a hard way. He just, you knew he was paying attention,
Right.
And I admired that.
Very good.
And I guess that's what led me to get into the Explorers and so forth.
Very good. So in all your years, what do you think you like the most about the job, about law enforcement? What did you like the most?
Well, I don't want to get too far down in the weeds, but I've always regarded police work as a ministry. Romans chapter 13.
There you go.
Yep. It's a
says,
calling.
"For he is the minister of good." He's the minister of good to thee. I can't even think of it now.
To those who do good, but
to those who do evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain.
Right, he does not carry the sword in vain, and that's always been my charter chapter, and it's inspired everything my entire career. So, it's a calling, and just like
Yep, definitely.
medicine or whatever.
So on the flip side of that, what really did you not like about the job? What did you like the least about the job?
Well, there are times when you have to engage the public in negative interactions because they're doing something stupid, and our job is to stop stupid. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's right.
And we're that thin blue line that stands between the predators and the prey. Very often the prey is oblivious to the threat.
Right.
Very often, in fact, they take for granted what we do or assume we do something other than protect them. And so that disconnect with the people that we're trying to protect has always been the thing I had the hardest time with.
Yeah, one of those things is the difference between firefighters and us. We're always the guys that have to tell people, no, you can't do that.
Or we deliver the bad news when somebody dies.
Exactly. We're not the good guys.
We're not the good
always
guys.
tell them you can't do what you want to do all the time.
Exactly.
Always got to bring the firemen in.
We're the social control mechanism. They're the heroes, right? I mean,
exactly.
And they get, hey, I don't want to offend anybody.
No, I don't want to go either.
But they 24 on, 48 off to work out until the fire comes, but anyway, so that's enough of that. There's always been a little competition between cops and firemen, and
but we love them. We rely on them. We hope that they're there when
But they always used to tell me all the time, "Man, you guys are crazy. I wouldn't do your job where people are trying to kill you and shoot at you and bullets." And I said, "Yeah, well, you're crazy. I wouldn't run into a burning building if you paid me twice what I'm making."
Right.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm not going to even open up the can of
well,
worms.
it's listen. Let's just
they
say
only
this.
do it to a certain extent, and then after it's too hot, then they don't go in. They just
I don't blame them, but
either way,
let's just say
we go into the bullets. It doesn't matter.
We run to the gunfire. They run to the fires.
Right. That's the bottom line.
It's their calling. So,
yeah. And now my daughter's going to kick my butt because my daughter's
more power to them.
Whatever. But I love you, Ash. You're a good girl. I love the fire department. I mean, I was one. I was a volunteer for between
Oh,
Broward and Plantation, 18 years.
Being
I
a fireman
loved
is
it.
very cool, actually. But
I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
The
Let's
old
go on with the
tail
show
by
now.
tailboat riding days.
Get in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, before we get any deeper.
But anyway, so getting back to the show, in reading your show prep, I couldn't help but notice that long before you made the move to DEA, you were very curious. Maybe that's not the word. Maybe you were very focused on drugs, the addiction, the societal way of life, and the impacts that accompanied it.
So this is why. Forgive me for cutting you off, but I'm going there.
You're going right to the question.
going right
My
to the
question is,
question.
before he answers it, is what drew your attention to the issue or piqued your interest so much that you decided that you needed to be on the front line?
So, as a young cop, I can remember a day when most crime was opportunistic. You know, if somebody stole something or something got robbed, and 90% of the crime was committed by 5% of the population.
Right.
Right? It was an easy job because you only had to police a certain segment of, and you'd see the same offenders over and over again. You got to know them, they got to know you. But in the early 80s, somebody invented crack cocaine. And it began to get distributed in the neighborhoods where I policed. And I watched lives change drastically. The sons and daughters of policemen, the sons and daughters of ministers. The first DEA agent I ever met, excuse me, walked up to my police car one day and said, identified himself and said, "I need your help." He says, "I can't find my daughter, and she's got a problem." Right? Well, without going into a lot of details, she wasn't hard to find. I knew, where to go look for her, and we dragged her out of the crack house and got her into treatment.
Right.
She went to jail. She wouldn't steal to support her habit, right? But she was a beautiful little blonde girl, and we pulled her out of the crack houses over and over and over again. And I got very attached to this family, very attached to this little girl, And ultimately, she contracted HIV, and this was back in the day when HIV was a death sentence, and she had passed by the time she was 24. Excuse me. And, Gary and I are contemporaries. Story after story after story of that kind of impact on people's lives who would have had another choice.
Right.
Had it not been for the drug addiction. And I just felt like, if I was going to be a cop, if I was going to live out my purpose in life, that I needed to go where I could do the most good. And DEA was it. I actually went out and interviewed, customs undercover boat handler, and I interviewed they had this long-haired guy at Boca Inlet, and I went out and talked to him. I talked to people from each of the federal agencies, and the person that made the greatest impact on me was an old DEA guy, Steve Greeley, and we got to be good friends.
Right.
He had indicted Noriega about that time.
Wow.
And so I was kind of his confidant in those times. And anyway, DEA just had a strong pull for me because of the nature of the mission.
Yeah.
And I regarded drugs as the single most significant social issue of my generation.
Wow, that's great.
And still do, frankly.
Definitely, it takes a special person to do that and focus, know that that's their calling and then focus towards that. Whereas, when when I got hired, I knew, hey, I became a law enforcement officer. Oh, now I want to go here. Now I want to go there. Now I want to go there. When you knew, from the get-go,
I did a number of different things. Yeah, I was with Deerfield for 14 years, but so I was canine handler, and I worked a year of traffic, and I was in. Funny story. We won't go into the details, but I was in the bureau for a while, and I just knew that I wanted to do something more than what I was able to do within that jurisdiction. So, federal service was the right thing for me.
Did you know just Joe Costelli?
Oh yeah, Joe and I are yeah.
He was one of my FTOs.
I got some Castelli stories, but I won't
loved
tell
him.
them on the air.
He's a great guy.
He's a great guy.
Well, that's good. Anyway, like I said, it's your whole background, bio, and everything is history. Your experience not only includes being an instructor and a supervisor for the DEA, but you also became a country attaché, right, for the U.S. Embassy in Haiti. Tell us about your assignment in Haiti, the responsibility you were given while you were there. Tell us, a little bit about that.
Well, I got to back up to a story that Gary and I were sharing on the in the green room before the show. When I first got hired with DEA, my first job was as a response investigator to customs seizures. Customs would seize drugs at the airport or at the seaport, and there was Vice President Bush had a task force in Florida of combined DEA customs guys, and we'd go out and investigate these seizures to see if we couldn't further the investigations beyond that. Anyway, long story short, it occurred to me, we arrested 3 Haitian girls one night, and they were body packing cocaine, and the short version of the story is I put that together with, I went back and did some homework, identified 15 other cases where there were about 20 other girls, and I combined all those investigations into one and ultimately prosecuted what they call a continuing criminal enterprise, a CCE. I identified the 6 guys who were responsible for all these couriers.
And they were all Haitians.
So
Right.
that brings the story home. In 1991, that was my initiation to Haitians. And I don't know, I just fell in love with the community. I fell in love with the people. I got to know them a lot. I went back and forth to Haiti for 20 years during the course of my enforcement career. And when I left training, I didn't want to finish my career as a trainer. I wanted to go back to the street for a while.
Right.
And the job opened up in Haiti. So I applied for it and I got it. Primarily, I guess, probably because I had such a history down there.
Awesome.
And I was known for that within my organization.
That's good.
But when we got down there, it was myself and 4 other criminal investigators and a support staff of 2 or 3 people. When we got down there was 40 narcotics agents assigned to the Haitian National Police who never left the office.
Really?
Never left the office.
So they had the position, but they never...
Well, they were run by a guy whose, let's say, his credibility was in question. Okay? So working with the Haitian government, we got him removed. We put a new guy in there that we knew was, credible and trustworthy. And we built it up to 140 agents. We seized all kinds of dopes. We traveled all over the country.
That's awesome.
There was a problem at the time with light aircraft coming in from Colombia and Venezuela, landing in Haiti, offloading dope, and then they would move it to these coastal freighters. And the coastal freighters would then come into Miami and Port Everglades and whatever. So that's what we did. We chased that.
That's awesome.
Hundreds of kilos, and lots and lots.
Literally
of
a lot of legwork there. A lot of back and forth. It's not a lot of.
We spent a lot of time on goat trails way up in the mountains where most people wouldn't go.
Well, and so obviously your experience is what enabled you, and why people recognized you, and the job that you do, and you became an instructor. You were an instructor, the DEA Training Academy in Quantico.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about. I believe you said you had developed some courses. Also, you did course development or something there as well.
All DEA instructors are expected to. They send us to a training as course developers and course presenters. So we customize training programs not only for DEA special agents, basic agents going through the academy, but we also teach at the FBI on counter-narcotics issues. And my particular unit, I did that for a year, but the unit I spent most of my time in was the International Training Unit. And what we did, was export American policing practices, best practices for narcotics enforcement to law enforcement executives around the world. In Bangkok, I went there 4 times a year. We'd bring in executives from police agencies from 11 different countries in Asia. In Africa, Botswana, Africa, all of the Southern African nations were represented with police executives there. We had 2 schools, international law enforcement academies, in South America and another one in Eastern Europe, in Budapest, Hungary. And so we just traveled around as a team doing counter-narcotics presentations for these executives so that they could then bring those practices home to their personnel.
Awesome, which is you pretty much cover my follow-up question would have been your travel opportunities as an instructor and stuff like that, where you got to conduct multi-jurisdictional investigations. You taught other agencies and stuff like that. Is that how it worked? And you put together these large groups of people and.
Well, so the training overseas is mostly organized by the State Department, U.S. State Department. And
so you have a curriculum to follow, or like something like that?
We would customize curriculums for the audience, depending on who the audience was, what their level of experience was.
Okay.
We would customize either a 40-hour or an 80-hour presentation for that particular group, address the issues relating. For example, in some countries you can't do undercover operations; it's illegal. So we wouldn't do undercover. We wouldn't teach an undercover course there. So we would study the nuances of where we were going, what they were allowed to do, what they weren't allowed to do, and we would customize a package for them. I did ad hoc schools in Jordan for the Cypriot cops and the Jordanians. I did an ad hoc school for the Iraqi police for 6 weeks in 2004. I mean, the travel opportunities were tremendous.
Yeah.
Like I said,
it was a very big workload. It was a very big. You had a lot of responsibility on your shoulders there to help.
I was lucky to have it. I was very fortunate to be there. I count my blessings. Yeah. I mean, it was a great opportunity.
What were you doing? Didn't you do something, or no? You were canine.
Well,
right? Were you drug canine? Yeah.
No, I wasn't canine. I was going to go into the canine unit. I had the dog, I had the car, I had everything, and then my wife came to me and said, "Guess what? I'm pregnant.
Oh.
I don't want you to go on midnight, so stay on the motorcycle squad."
There you go.
That took care of that. But I did a lot of the stuff Gary's talking about.
Yeah.
Not the schooling, but we all share a lot of the same stories and experiences. When I was in the organized crime division and federal task forces, I did a lot of that stuff. So.
And you did that for how long? How long were you with that?
Probably half my career almost.
Yeah.
15 years or better.
Awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it was the number one problem, right? For our generation of police officer, wherever you worked, you were a drug agent,
Yeah.
And we were sharing stories in the green room before that, we sitting out in the Everglades waiting on airplanes or boats, sitting, good times, man.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's
a lot of funny stories.
That's probably where we need to go back to. Wherever you work, you become, you get involved in the drug stuff to.
Well, it's the same thing for young cops now,
Yeah, but I mean, it's today's police work. I mean, it is so busy out there, and we're so short-handed, and
so many new things to concentrate on.
Yeah, there really are.
Terrorism and all that stuff that we didn't have to put so much stuff into back in the day. I was doing Russian organized crime, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, that's not important anymore, and I'm off to Bin Laden and the boys, and
exactly. Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to tonight's topic. The United States is in the midst of an opioid epidemic. The American Society of Addiction Medicine indicates that close to 3 million people battled opioid addiction to either heroin or prescription painkillers in 2015. More than 60% of the record high overdose deaths in 2015 involved an opioid drug. You all right there? 91 people in the U.S. die from opioid overdose daily. The Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention reports. Also in 2015, roughly 300 million prescriptions were dispensed for narcotic pain medications around the world, and Americans consumed 80% of them. That being said, I mean, obviously you know numbers. You've been there. You've done that. You know where we were, where we are, because you've studied it intensely, and you made it your mission, like you said. What about past and current social attitudes today towards drug use? What do you think about?
I think it's just repeating, itself. I mean, we consumed, as a nation, we consumed 80% of the cocaine in the world too. Colombian politicians and even cops will tell you that Colombia doesn't have a drug problem. America's got a drug problem, right?
We have the most money, for one thing.
We have the most money. And therein lies the problem to some degree. When you're in an affluent country with a lot of disposable income, and we live in the most prosperous time in human history and the most prosperous nation in the world per capita, and it's not enough. For some reason we need something more, And like I say, going back to the earliest parts of my career, young people get involved in a drug culture, right? You're in high school, everybody has a couple of beers, everybody gets into a little trouble. The reason, this is not a popular opinion, but the reason have always been opposed to marijuana legalization is because it's a gateway drug. Now, I've come to think differently about it. I believe, we'll go back to the gateway drug point for just a second. I've never met a heroin addict, I've never met a coke addict, I've never met a meth addict who didn't get introduced to the drug culture through marijuana. They started off, smoking weed, and through those social associations, they came into contact with more powerful drugs. And I believe that in my experience, based on what I saw in the crack epidemic, that's what happened.
But just to go back on that, just to touch on that just for a second. So it's understandable, yeah. All these other type of drugs you can trace back to their beginning use of marijuana, but not all marijuana users turn out to be heroin, crack cocaine,
No, absolutely, but not all people who drink become alcoholics. But
right.
But alcoholism is a serious problem in this country. It's one of the leading causes of death. Most doctors will tell you that.
Right.
In our generation of cop, we've had to go from very light enforcement of DUI laws because so many people were dying. I lost a brother in a DUI car accident. We had to get more strenuous about the enforcement of DUI laws. So you're right. Not everybody who smokes pot becomes a drug addict. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of people who have addiction problems to alcohol can turn to marijuana as an alternative source of satisfying whatever that need is,
right,
without killing themselves on alcohol, because alcohol will kill you,
Right. And that, you watched last week's episode, you watched the rerun where I was talking about, when you think about this stuff, and then to think that in New York they're talking about not, charging kids with drinking and with marijuana in the schools, and you got to think, what are these people thinking?
Well, and interestingly enough, I loved your comment by your tech. He says, you can smoke pot and drink at school, but if you smoke a cigarette out in public, they're going to hang you, right?
Yeah. My tech. You hear that, Danny?
Sorry.
Danny. You are my tech.
We just went off the air.
Yeah. Now, before we touch on it, we've got a caller on the phone, a caller on the line. We'll go ahead and answer it. I think it might be Tina. You told Tina to call in. It might be Iran. But we'll go ahead and answer and get ready, Gary, because you're in trouble. I'm just kidding. Hello, Tina.
You have ESP.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to call.
I know you.
Hello, Gary. You love me. I love you. I'm answering your prayers.
How are you? Good.
I'm well. And yourself?
Great.
So is this a social call to Gary, or is it like...
Of course,
No,
she can't
no,
help
no.
herself.
No, I'm just kidding.
She's only human.
Yes, actually. But no, it's also directed for your guest, Gary, with the whole drug situation. Like, Anthony being my big brother and also being a law enforcement officer, he knows I'm not an angel. I've dabbled in pot smoking in my younger days, but with a 17 and a 15-year-old child, I worry maybe they will try to experiment with pot smoking or something in these days. You're speaking about when crack cocaine was introduced in the 80s and it became an epidemic. Well, now, I don't know about down there in Florida, but the big thing here is everything being laced with the fentanyl.
Huge.
Which we're definitely going to touch on. But yes, go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, that's my thing. I mean, there are so many deaths and overdoses, like daily, and these are some kids that have never even tried drugs before. So that's what we're talking to our kids about, that, while it may be, just the thing that teenagers do, experiment, whatever, if you even think to try something once, it may be your last time.
Well, see, and
you
I'm
try it once and you're going to die.
I'm glad you said that, Tina, because that's going to bring up a point that I want to talk about with the fentanyl, because we see it all the time down here. I mean, it's crazy down here. I mean, now we're carrying Narcan to administer. I mean, we're not paramedics and EMTs, but we're carrying Narcan to administer to these because it saves lives. It does.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I agree.
Here's the issue, though.
Well, and
sorry, Tina, give me just 1 second.
Go ahead.
And I'll give you an example. Just not last week. We go to a call. He's dead, not breathing, blah, blah, blah. We get there, Narcan installed, Sure enough, he's turning purple, and sure enough, he's gone. He's done. And, shot of the Narcan, and boom, he's back. I mean, literally getting ready to call the guy, and literally comes back to life. And then, I'm not overdosed anymore. I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm good. But when they do it over and over and over and over again, and we keep responding out there and bringing them back, they're getting comfortable in that level. And I just don't think that's a safe place for us.
Oh, it's not.
I don't think it's a safe place for us.
One of the problems is that a lot of addicts go back and forth to detox and rehabs and back and forth. And then when they've been clean for a while, then they get dirty again and they go back out and they use. And you can't go use the same amount or dose that you used before.
Right.
But that's what they do, and that's what kills them, because it's got the fentanyl in it, but it's the dosage.
Yeah, but
that
people
they shoot up and it's all over there.
They're getting so comfortable though with doing it and knowing that they're going to be
not only that,
rescued.
Narcan's costing a lot of money, and some of the cities recently have said, we're not doing this anymore. We're not buying it, we're not carrying it, and we're not shooting them up anymore.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's tough. It's definitely tough, especially having with kids in 17 and 15 nowadays. I mean, this is a pretty.
Right. It's scary.
It's a pretty tough time right now.
So let me jump in on Tina's question.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Gary.
Well, no, that's okay. I mean, I want this discussion, but the fact of the matter is, all you can do is talk to your kids.
Right.
Like I say, the first DEA guy I ever met lost a child to drug addiction, or the consequences resulting from the drug addiction. All you can do is talk to your kids and try to give them the best information you can, supervise them, discipline them to the extent that helps. Once they get to be 15 or 17, the discipline only goes so far because they're going to do what they want to do. But you just need to educate them about the consequences of their actions. I used to tell my kids, one night, one bad decision can change your life forever. Ever.
Yep.
One night, one bad decision. And we'll talk more about that in a bit.
Yep.
Right. And thankfully, I'm a catechist at our church, and we have a program where we have the local police department come in, and they do go over a film with, unfortunately, drug addiction, and at, catechism age. I mean, it starts in first grade, but it goes over the drug abuse, and, parents get a Narcan kit and the whole 9 yards, but they show the children, somebody on the side of the road, down from
Yeah, I think that was
an overdose.
that was a big thing many years ago. I mean, not when I was young, but when they were remember this the scared straight era
the DARE program,
and they would take you. Let's bring them. I'm going to bring you to the morgue. You want to see what it's like? I mean, the scared straight. I mean, literally scaring them because you had to do that. I've been fortunate enough that I told my kids and I explained to them and pretty straight up with everything in their lives, and I've been very fortunate and blessed that for the most part everything has turned out good so far.
Thank God.
But the
and
whole
my
thing.
son's been fortunate enough to have you in the black box in the garage.
That's a whole another story. But that's it. That is, yeah. But Tina, thanks for calling in. It is it's very scary.
Thank you for your work.
And besides, they don't want to start that because I'll have to come and talk to them, and I don't think Adam wants to talk to me.
Absolutely.
Bye, Tina.
So, thank you very much.
You can talk to them next week. Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Good night. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and that brings me to as we can only do so much as the parents. I mean, we can tell them, right, once they get older and they make their own decisions. And I'm glad it's talking about the fentanyl because it brings up the story that, and I wasn't going to list this as one of the 3 stories we talked about, but just in doing my show prep, the girl, did you hear about the girl from American Idol? What's her name? Her name is Antonella Barba. You remember this girl from Idol?
Yeah, I think.
Fentanyl. So now she's going to go to prison because, they found 2 pounds of fentanyl in her rental car.
Oh, 2 pounds. Oh, geez.
And I'm saying, what are you thinking? I mean, you had this huge, thing with American Idol and everything, and you were going places, and then what makes you?
Hey, what do all the celebrities think? And they get on drugs too. So,
well,
they're a multi-million-dollar actor and actress, and they shoot up heroin. So
well, I mean, and that's really an important point to bring up. Is it doesn't matter what your social level is. It doesn't matter if you were born poor, if you were born rich.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, once you try it, and that was the problem with crack cocaine. Kids who basically had never really done anything take a hit off a pipe,
right?
And without going into the details of the pharmacology of it, the way the drug impacts your body, it produces a high that is extraordinarily satisfying. The problem is you'll never get that high again, but you'll chase it for the rest of your life.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
And heroin does the same thing. It's a different nature of the drug. It's a depressant rather than like meth, but it's the same concept, right? Once you get that feeling, nothing else matters but that feeling. You'll, and it's a path, right? First it's, well, I don't mind giving up my job, I got to go get high. Then it's, I don't mind giving up my marriage, I got to go get high. I don't mind giving up my kids, I got to go get high, right? I don't mind selling my body, I got to go get high. They walk down this garden path, and it's just more and more deterioration, worse and worse judgment. My youngest son's best friend from school just succumbed to a heroin overdose. He had started taking pills, and because he couldn't get the pills, he switched to heroin. And he got a hot shot. Probably
so it's easier for him to get the
pills,
heroin than
pills
it was
get
for
too
the
expensive, and heroin's really cheap.
Exactly.
So let me ask you this then: is it just me, or the last few drugs, did they come and go rapidly, like the Flocka, when people were doing it? I mean, it was marijuana, it was heroin, it was acid. I'm talking about way
back in the day.
And it seemed like it was like to me, it appears it was slow and spread out. But then the last few, within the last 10, 15 years or whatever, the different drugs, was it a rapid introduction and switch over, or am I just...
Well, I didn't want to get too far down in the weeds on it, but the heroin addiction situation goes back to the 50s and 60s, right? And if you look at speed and amphetamines and so forth, that even goes back much farther. But, the current issue is, I believe it started the real bad stuff started with the crack cocaine epidemic, because popping acid was a choice. It wasn't addictive. Smoking pot really is not addictive. It's habit forming, but not addictive. But crack cocaine, heroin, any of the opioids, methamphetamine.
Crack is still out there, but I don't think it's near as popular as it used to be.
Which not, and for obvious reasons, because you can make meth. I have a case right now in my private investigation business where a guy was making meth. They got a one-pot cook now that they can do if they get the right ingredients. He was cooking meth with his 4 kids sleeping in the same house. You know,
I wouldn't doubt it.
and but the high from meth lasts much longer than crack cocaine, and you don't have to import it. You can make it right there in your kitchen sink, and so that's why meth has superseded crack as a drug of choice.
Wow.
And meth is extremely addicting as well. Extremely addicting. It's I mean, have you've seen before and after pictures of meth addicts? Oh my God! Have you ever? I mean, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
you know, another issue too that I think we need to touch on too is the prescription drug problem.
Right,
Absolutely.
which is I was gonna talk a little bit about that too. The oxycodones, you know the what do they had? Roxycodone, Percocet. They say oxycodone is it's more than $35 billion in sales for Purdue Pharma since it burst onto the market since 1995.
So here's my spin on that. Forgive me for interrupting, but
Go ahead.
The fact of the matter is,
I told you how the show is formatted, so you can do whatever you got to do.
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm really enjoying this.
Oh, good.
The fact of the matter is, the cocaine epidemic spawned the Medellin cartel and the Cali cartel, and basically the executive boards of Let's Go Poison America for fun and profit, right? And the stories both Gary and I can tell you are legion about the impact of all that. So I don't recognize any difference between the board of directors of the Medellin cartel or the Medellin Cali cartel than I do Big Pharma, because it's poisoning people for profit.
Yeah.
You know, and until we hold these people, the corporations need to be held civilly liable so that the shareholders feel the pain, you know, and the people who make the distribution decisions, the doctors that make the prescriptions, need to go to prison.
And the marketing.
Yeah,
A lot of the reason they're being sued now is for aggressive marketing.
Absolutely.
When they should have known better.
Just like big tobacco. I mean, they're selling, you know, Joe Camel was selling cigarettes to kids. Well, the Big Pharma is marketing so aggressively, it's like the guy you ran into at the restaurant, right? I had a little stroke, and I've been taking, 20 pills a month now ever since. When there's no basis, no medical basis for that.
No.
And I will tell you, not that I was naive to it, I just don't think I ever thought too heavily about it, but not until I did the research on the site. And it's amazing because the good thing about doing the last 3 shows, it has enabled me to see things when I'm doing the research and finding things. And Big Pharma to me, when I heard that word prior to researching the show, was Big Pharma. So it's what, it takes a whole nother meaning. It takes on a whole nother meaning now that I've read about it and I followed up on it and I've checked, did my show research and I learned a lot of stuff about it. It's crazy. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Not long ago, 60 Minutes or 48 Hours, one of those type of shows, did a special on the pills and prescriptions. And I think they tuned in on a small town in Kentucky, about 800 population. I'm not sure about the numbers, but I'm guesstimating.
Right.
800 population. They had a pill mill there, and they were giving out a million doses for 800,000 population, a million or more doses of pills, and it's just crazy.
For the audience, define a pill mill. I mean, it's just what the name implies, right?
Well,
it's a doctor's office.
I know recently there's someone that went to a pill mill doctor. They knew they were an addict, and they gave him a prescription for 90 Klonopins. 90, and they were gone and nothing flat, whoever took them.
No questions asked.
I mean, that's just the way it is.
And it's crazy because we get calls for it all the time, daily. Oh, my pill! Somebody stole my pills. Somebody stole my pills. And
sure.
A lot of the times we go there to do the reports.
They steal them.
Right.
They used them ahead of time.
Right. But see, don't
and
tell
they want
that,
us to
don't
give
tell
them
that to the addict.
Yeah, no, I did the same thing. I told him I'm not taking your report. You're lying.
Well, we can't. It all depends on the circumstances, but for the most part, we know what's going on. You can tell. It's
just a sad state of affairs, and like you say,
and
stealing,
that's
lying to the cops.
Yeah.
Just to get more pills. Filing a false police report just to get more pills.
Yeah.
You're literally sticking your hand in the lion's mouth just to satisfy your addiction.
And that's why I said
shows they'll do anything.
All the show research has given me a whole nother perspective on Big Pharma, because like I said, Big Pharma to me was just a word before until I did the research on it. And before we talk about that, so we were talking the DEA. I wanted to talk about hydrocodone too, because the DEA, the agency you work for, said that hydrocodone is one of the drugs most frequently involved in prescription opioid overdose deaths.
Absolutely.
And it's considered highly addictive. They said that hydrocodone is the top prescribed and most regularly diverted and abused opioid drug. Americans consume 99% of the world's supply of hydrocodone, which is crazy.
Yeah, because we're not in that much pain,
99% of the world's hydrocodone.
We're just not in that much pain.
No, I'm not hurting that bad.
Yeah, I'm not hurting that bad either.
I mean, I'm old, but it's still.
But it's amazing. Like I said, I'm glad you came to the show, and we did this show on a number of levels.
Well, let me say, speaking.
Well, he's not done yet.
I'm not done
yet.
Oh
no, I'm just saying.
We got to get him. We got to get him going here.
Exactly. So, I never like to oversimplify any problem. So let's talk about Big Pharma for just a minute while we're there.
Sure.
Okay, they are for-profit companies, and their shareholders are entitled to make a profit, right? We all depend, and we've got one of the best life expectancies of any nation in the world, because, frankly, we've got some of the best medical care in the world.
Right.
Big Pharma is entitled to make their profit. They're entitled. They need money to do research. Researching new drugs that are saving lives costs money, but somebody's got to draw the line about where they make that profit, and it cannot be at the expense of the American public. Until enough senators or Congress people lose their children to an overdose, you're not going to see it change. But a lot of attorneys general around the country right now are suing Big Pharma for the costs of the opioid epidemic within their jurisdictions. And I think that that's a great start. So.
Yep. And so now moving back to the fentanyl, that has exploded. It's gone crazy as far as the rate that people are doing it at. And according to the DEA, there were 6.5 million prescriptions given out in 2015 of fentanyl. Okay, and not only can you get them as a prescription from your doctors, but they're available in several different forms. Lozenges. You can get it. You can do it nasally, subliminal sprays.
Lollipops.
They freeze it up in patches so they could suck or chew on these patches, or they scrape the gel off of these patches to inject it, which is, I mean, when you think about the different ways that people are going, the different levels that they're going to get this stuff and take it.
Yeah, the desperation is just mind-boggling.
And like you said,
first of all, fentanyl has to be dosed with other drugs and cut with other stuff. You just can't. You just can't take fentanyl.
Not as an abuse.
All you have to do is do just a little bit too much, and it's all over.
Right.
Well, so can I touch on that for one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
Second?
Go ahead.
So
go ahead.
The problem with fentanyl, and they used to warn us about this all the time when we were doing drug raids. If a police officer is in the middle of a drug raid or a search warrant, and he comes across it and he or she doesn't recognize the risk, that's why I'm very much in favor of police officers carrying Narcan, Not necessarily for the addict, although I guess
them.
we have a,
Right.
for the police officer.
Yeah.
Because if a cop goes down, and I've heard of a case of
Absorbing through their hands and fingers.
Yeah,
and-
I heard that it's absorbed through the skin, and it's very easily absorbed.
very easily absorbed, and
Small amount.
all you got to do is, God forbid, the package is open a little bit, rub your eye.
Yeah.
So as a safety measure for law enforcement, I believe cops need to be carrying Narcan
Sure.
to protect ourselves.
Yep, I agree. So with that being said, why don't we go ahead and take a break, and you can take a quick bathroom break and stuff like that, get a drink, and then we'll come back and we'll get into more of the other stuff that you want to get into and more deeper into that. And, as a reminder, Copservations is broadcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Copservation Facebook page, the Copservations YouTube channel, and on the Copservations Twitter page at Copservations_. We're going to take a little break, but don't forget, if you have a comment, question, or a story you'd like to share, join the conversation. We want you to join the conversation. Tina called in already. I got more than that in sisters, and I know I got cousins listening. Did you tell anybody, Gary? No, I'm just kidding. Sometimes people are very adamant or pretty shy about calling in. I don't understand why, but it's okay. So just call us, come join the conversation, give the podcast studio a call, toll free, no money. 888-511-COPS, 888-511-2677. Or you can instant message, right? We'll answer, you don't even have to tell us on there, not to give your name, if you're really that worried about it.
And if you're that worried, you can text me like the guy did last week.
Yeah. And we threw his name out there anyways.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter. So just instant message your questions or comments to us on our Facebook page. But don't go anywhere, because we'll be right back.
Are your children in the right car seat for their age and size? Is the seat supposed to be forward-facing or rear-facing? Did they move to a booster seat too soon? It may be too late to check when you're on the road. Fortunately, you're on the couch. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Don't think you know. Know you know.
How to continue the talk with your friend about their mental health after you ask about how they were feeling. Put down that phone. Do it. Nobody's texting you. Phone down. Good. Now it's time to listen. If they're not ready to talk yet, check back in later.
I'm always here if you want to talk. Okay?
That was great. Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org. Awkward.
listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk.
No matter what you're going through,
I just want you to know I'm here.
I've got your back. When you want to talk, I'm here.
Awkward.
If you love them enough to suck the snot out of their nose at 4 a.m., then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here. But an awkward silence can be a great thing. It can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down. It doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G?
You all right, girl? You cool?
You bugging dog.
Just show you're there for them. Go on, Kelly. It's easy, awkward.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org. How to know if you should reach out to a friend. Your friend might be.
To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677.
Welcome back to Copservations. Tonight's guest is Gary Coffman, and our discussion is law enforcement's battle with drugs and the addiction epidemic. Gary, as far as I see it, your extensive work and experience makes you an expert in the subject. What is your understanding with drug use, sales, and the lower socioeconomic neighborhoods?
All right, I wouldn't call myself an expert on anything, but
I would. I mean, I think it's a very impressive resume.
But
I'm tooting your own horn for you, but I really admire.
But I have an opinion on everything, and I'm perfectly happy to give it to you.
Okay.
So let's talk about that. I mean, you know, when Gary and I were young cops, I mean, that's what we saw, right? We saw open-air drug markets. We saw in neighborhoods where there were not a lot of economic opportunities, we saw the beginnings of these open-air drug markets. And this country is suffering the consequences of that to this day. It's kind of a vicious cycle, you know, so you've got these poor kids, nothing else to do, no economic opportunity, but, you know, some Colombian settles into the neighborhood and says, boys, I can fix you up, right? And the next thing you know, he's distributing cocaine through these guys. And
Crack cocaine.
Crack cocaine.
Because there were two kinds of drugs back in the day. The poor kids' drugs, crack cocaine,
right,
and marijuana then. And then the rich kids' drugs that were the designer drugs, and that's what all the rich kids were taking.
Or the cocaine powder, you know.
Yeah, and cocaine in powder form, yeah.
Back in the day, some secretary who's making $125 a week is dropping $60 on a gram of powder, right? But crack comes along, and now she likes the feeling, so she can drive over into the lower socioeconomic neighborhoods and pick up a rock for $10, you know, and that's where that started. Well, based on that economy, now you've got guys standing out on the corner selling dope, with money in their pockets. Well, if you got money in your pockets in a lower socioeconomic neighborhood, you've got to worry about protecting it, right? So you're carrying a gun. And, you know, I could tell war stories all night long about policing Front Street in Deerfield and the close calls we had, protecting the people in the street from the guys up the road who would come into town and pull out the MAC-10s and, you know, the high-capacity automatic pistols to engage in robbery. And a lot of deaths happened that way. So you get that economic shot in the arm, pardon the pun, into these lower socioeconomic neighborhoods that come with violence, that come with more drug distribution, and the drug distribution begets more violence, and it's a cycle. Well, no business is going to come and invest in that community when that's the main draw.
Right.
So now what you have is perpetuation, this cycle of there's nothing here to do except sell dope, right? And then you get the gangs, because you got to have, you know, people out there boys to have your back, right? So they break off into gangs, and the next thing you know, there's turf wars and violence for the sake of who gets the corner. And this has gone on since the 80s, and the anti-police sentiment that you see going in the nation right now is, I believe, a consequence of us trying to police those communities and make them safe for the decent people that live there, right? Because, you know, you've got single mothers and people trying to earn a living in these neighborhoods that have to run this gauntlet of, you know, drug trafficking just to make a living, just to get out and buy milk for the kids.
Right.
And so we go in, we try to enforce the law. Now we become the bad guy. And
you know, there are a lot of people in those neighborhoods too that want us in there.
That want us
because
there.
they go home at night, get their groceries, go in the house and lock the doors, and they stay in because they're afraid of getting shot.
The kids can't play out in the yard because they're afraid of getting shot.
Yep.
You ask anybody in Liberty City, you go to any church in Liberty City and talk to the parishioners there, the congregation there, and they'll say they don't know what to do because they lock themselves in at night. They're prisoners in their own homes because the gangsters are controlling the streets. And
but then,
go ahead.
When the cops show up and start shooting people, then all of a sudden, you're shooting too many people here. What are you doing?
Well,
we're not the bad guys.
We're not the bad guys. And how do you go in and enforce the law among people who are intrinsically violent? I mean, it's now part of the culture and lifestyle to be violent because they have to protect themselves or they're fighting for turf or whatever. You can't go in there and say, hey, you know, I'm a nice guy, you're a nice guy, we want you to, you know, we want to keep the streets safe. Why don't you put your guns away? Can I digress a little bit?
You can listen.
All right.
Whatever you want, bud.
As they say in showbiz, the floor is yours.
All right. So in preparation for this, I was watching a thing on television on PBS about this program in Baltimore, which is one of the most violent cities in the country.
Baltimore?
Baltimore.
Oh, yeah.
About how they're trying to address the violence. Bear with me as I go through this.
Sure.
I know this is intended for a cop audience, but I'm gonna go here. Okay. They have started programs now where they're recruiting. I'm gonna call it the way we would call it, reformed thugs as violence interrupters. Right? They're treating the gun violence in this country like you would treat a medical epidemic. Right? The procedure for interrupting an epidemic is to do social isolation so that you cut off the propagation of the disease.
So but before you go on, explain that a little bit. I'm probably a little slow because I don't quite get the gist. So what you're saying is they're using
techniques that you would use to stop a medical epidemic,
right?
As an exemplar of how to deal with the gun violence
by reformed thugs.
So
well, I mean, hear me out.
Well,
now.
this is what I'm saying. So that's where my question was. Do you mean that they're taking actual criminals or people who have been?
I don't know what the recruitment process is. Just let me. I know this is going to sound far-fetched.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand.
But so here's my logic. Okay, so I had a little trouble watching the show, and one of the guys that they put up there, who was a violence interrupter, they literally showed a segment where one person in the community had ordered a hit on another person in the community, a retribution killing, and ultimately his crew targeted the wrong guy. Well, needless to say, that guy was upset, so now he wants to engage in a retribution killing on the guy who ordered the hit, right? They actually hired this guy to go out here and mediate between these two gangsters who were, trying to kill each other. And they showed his negotiation technique. And yes, he has street creds because he's from the hood, right? I'm all for it. I think it's a great idea because you know what I didn't see? I didn't see a police officer having to get in the middle of this and draw fire from these two hoodlum groups, And as far as I'm concerned, we have to think outside the box. We have to do something creative. Otherwise, that pattern of violence and drug trafficking and no opportunities is just going to continue a downward spiral in most of these communities.
And like Trump said when he was running his campaign, what the hell do you have to lose?
Right. Try something. And as far as I'm concerned, if it takes a cop out of the line of fire, I'm all for it.
Right.
I'm all for it. So that kind of leads me to one of the arguments in the anti-law enforcement mechanism for handling the drug epidemic. Well, let's make it a medical problem. Let's treat it like let's decriminalize it and treat it like a medical issue. And that's being tried in Europe. The places that are trying it, Amsterdam and places like that, are the cesspools of Europe. Because where it's legal, all these drug addicts migrate in from countries where it's not legal, and they get their free needles and they get their free health care. It's not free health care. They're getting it for free, but the
residents are paying for it.
The other residents are paying for it. But
are you talking about all drugs? Are you talking about the legalizing?
That's what they do. No, let me rephrase that. So marijuana is legal.
Okay.
The community standard is no enforcement of the harder drugs. The police turn a blind eye. I was in Amsterdam one night walking the neighborhoods, and no less than 4 people offered me cocaine and heroin while I was there. And I'm just a tourist there for one night, as far as they're concerned. And the police are walking the same neighborhoods, keeping order, right? So if a fight breaks out or whatever, they intervene, but they do nothing to stop the drug trafficking. And of course, that creates a black market,
right.
And they have the same cycle of violence and economic opportunity, the violence to protect the economic opportunity, and so forth. So, but I raised that as an issue because, as off the wall as it sounds, as leftist as it sounds as a potential mechanism for dealing with the gun violence, we got to try something.
Right.
And I'm tired.
But we're talking about Baltimore's trying, not Amsterdam. We don't go.
Right.
We're not for that.
Well, but the fact of the matter is, this is a model that's been created at Harvard University and some other think tanks that's being tried around the world. And one of the places where something similar was implemented was in formerly controlled ISIS territory, where Christians and Muslims have, centuries-old conflict. I won't digress into that because it's off topic.
Yeah,
but
no.
it's actually an international model that's being tried around the world in places where violence is the norm. And a number of cities across the U.S. are trying it. And as I say, if it saves one cop's life, like the guy killed in Georgia, who's there, trying to make the streets safer.
Right.
If we can pull a police officer out of the line of fire and come up with another mechanism that might solve the problem, might do something for the problem, hey, I'm all for it.
Mm-hmm.
So That's a little bit of a departure from the traditional police thinking, but
Yeah, well, it's like you said, we got to start somewhere. I mean, I also think that we need to get back to the kids again and start really, really, like we talked about earlier, letting them know if you're gonna touch this stuff, this is what's gonna happen. We're just gonna lay it out in front of you. I know they're kids and stuff, but sometimes that's what they need.
Absolutely.
To know.
But we need to find something other than the just say no thing, and that's not going to work.
Yeah, but
that's
Well, so you wouldn't think about letting your kid cross the street without teaching him to look for cars,
right?
I mean, and as far as I'm concerned, it goes that young, and it's the same principle. You tell them what the dangers are, and if you save one life, if you save your kid's life, then you've done the right thing. I don't care if it's DARE or say no to drugs or hypnosis or voodoo. I don't care what you implement, as long as it works, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah.
There's Gary destroying the microphone.
Yeah, again, I noticed.
Gary, that mic doesn't owe you money. Stop it.
Yeah, leave it alone.
Stop the violence.
Well, since we're talking about the kids, so one of the other statistics that I had pulled up in here in my research was that youth are especially vulnerable to drug abuse, according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse. Young Americans engaged in extraordinary levels of illicit drug use in the last third of the 20th century. Today, about 48%, almost half the kids, have used an illicit drug by the time they leave high school.
And that's the ones that just honestly report. Imagine the ones that say, no, I didn't, but did. You know?
And they say, and it also said that 7% were 8th graders.
Mm-hmm.
8th graders. 16% were 10th graders. 24% were 12th graders and current users. It's just half of the country's kids are dipping in.
Yeah, it's
in
not
narcotics.
1965 anymore.
No, well, I mean, the first time I ever saw pot was in 7th grade, sitting around in gym class, and the teachers just left us under a tree and went and did something, and a couple of kids break out a spliff, that's what we call it now.
Yeah,
a spliff, and just, they passed it back and forth for the, they were the cool kids, and but that's the problem. It's so prolific, so widespread that it's going to be hard to get a handle on.
And let me tell you, the weed that he's talking about passing back and forth, wasn't even strong stuff. The weed they're smoking nowadays, woo, buddy, that stuff will light you up.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we have in our, like, where we do our report writing, we have evidence lockers back there, and
I hate that.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you guys smoke in there.
No, come on.
No, but
the smell,
I
it is so strong.
Yeah, they used to they'd bring a truckload in and put it in the evidence locker. I couldn't work in the building. I couldn't stay there.
Absolutely. And so since you had mentioned the spliff with the with the marijuana, but I wanted to talk about some of the street names of the narcotics that they were using. They call narcotics or opioids, they call them smack, horse, mud, brown sugar, junk, black tat, big H, paregoric, Dover's powder, MPTP, which is a new heroin, I guess. MPTP.
It's a synthetic drug.
Hillbilly heroin.
That's Oxy and those things. So
yeah, you get those in Kentucky.
Yeah, unfortunately, you get that list from the same generation that Gary and I are in.
Yeah, those are old.
Those are a little dated. And I'll be honest with you, I've been off the street for a while, so.
Me too, but
every
horse? Come on.
Yeah, what is a horse?
That's what they called it in the 60s. But, every generation's got its thing, because every generation sees it as new. The people that came before them don't understand their lifestyle. They don't understand their model, and say they always come up with some. in their minds, they're creating all this stuff from scratch. So it's probably got some new names.
Oh wait,
that I'm not aware
here's some other ones: Apache, China Girl, Chinatown, Dance Fever. Are those old ones?
Dance Fever? Yeah.
Goodfellas, Great Bear, Jackpot.
Donnie Brasco, yeah.
Yeah. Tango and Cash.
Hey, I know him,
I have that.
The real guy.
I figured you did. Yeah, I mean.
Well, it's rough stuff. It's like
he's
I
the
said,
real
it's
deal. He was the real deal. Sorry.
It's
go ahead.
it's either way, it's bad stuff. It doesn't matter what they are. Maybe my show research is a little dated, but
no, that's probably what's out there online.
they're still calling.
But the fact of the matter is, you'd have to bring some 15-year-old in here to find out what it's actually called. Now.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, in doing my research for the show, I found that early intervention is key. As they say, overdose is preventable, and opioid addiction is treatable. And there are several things to watch out for when abuse of narcotic is suspected, like mood swings, erratic sleep patterns, changes in appetite, slurred speech, all that good stuff. When a person is concerned that a loved one of theirs may be addicted or have an issue, and they're afraid to say anything, like some people don't want to get that person in trouble, and they're actually hurting them more than they are doing any good by not saying that they're addicted, or they believe that they're addicted, to find out if they are and get them the help that they need.
They're called an enabler.
That's exactly right. It's like that commercial you broadcast on the break about, don't be afraid to say something if you're concerned about the mental health of someone you love.
Right.
If you stay quiet, the situation will only get worse.
Right.
Intervention may or may not help, but imagine the tragedy of not saying something and losing a child to an overdose, knowing that in the back of your mind you've known for 6 months or a year, but you were afraid to say something. You don't get any second chances with some of this stuff.
No, when it's your child, you just got to do whatever you can and whatever you got to do to try and get them out of it. But to be honest with you, a true drug addict, the success rate is about 10% maybe.
Yeah.
And Florida is one of the worst places.
You mean as far as turning them around?
Oh yeah.
Only 10%?
The chances of just 10% of them make it back long term ever.
Which is that
Which
number
is not much.
alone should be scary to people that are listening.
They don't want to do it, but they're going to do it. They tell you that I'm scared to go back out. I'm scared I'm going to die. If I shoot this fentanyl, if I shoot this stuff, or if I take too much, I know I'm going to do it. But 2 weeks later, they're back out doing it again. And like you said, they do the drug overdose, they get the Narcan, and they're ready to go again. And that's just the nature of the beast, and there's just about nothing you can do. You have to try and educate your kids and somehow let them know how bad this stuff really is. Not just telling them, I don't know how you're going to do it, but somehow letting them see what the real deal is.
Interesting thing back when I was a cop, and I'm sure you saw the same thing. I'd be working in the neighborhoods where these crack houses were at, knocking off buyers and, making arrests whenever I could. And you'd see the little kids out there ride their bikes or whatever. Now, admittedly, some of them are lookouts, right? Because they're the drug slinger baby brother or whatever.
Right.
But I would talk to some of these kids and I'd say, man, you see how bad it is out here. You've gotta be aware of the dangers to you if you get caught up in this stuff. And I had one little girl tell me one time, she says, I lost my mama, I haven't seen my mama in 2 years. I live with my grandma, and my mama's got a problem with it, right? And that's why she's gone. She says, there's no danger of me getting involved in this because it's already cost me too much. She was like 9 or 10,
Well, there's a lot of grandparents out there raising their grandkids.
For exactly that reason.
Yep.
Yep. For exactly that reason.
Well, it's so big, Gary.
It is.
It is so big. and
I know that the street cops are trying to attack it at the street drug level and the street dealers. DEA has been trying for years to hit them at the top, hit them in the pocketbook, but it seems like none of it's really working to really cut.
That's good that you said that.
And the drug on war is not really working. Like there's the war on drugs, but maybe we need to fight a real war on drugs.
You use that term now. You got to give me a minute to
There we go.
talk about it.
I
Here
want
we
you to
go.
talk about
Which
it.
one?
All right, the war on drugs.
Okay,
Here we go.
Let me say something else too before you do that.
Hold that thought, Gary. I don't want to lose that, though.
No, he won't. He's not as old as I am. Just recently, where the Mormon family was murdered by the drug cartels in Mexico.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And Trump, with a good heart, is talking about, well, maybe we need to go down and with our military and help them out and kill all these well, that's what they really need, but that's not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen is he knows, and I know, that the governor, the president of Mexico, is not going to want to do that because he's going to lose his cash cow and his payments.
Right.
And his retirement because of all the millions. In other words, they're all going to lose their bribes. Nobody wants to do this because they want to lose their bribes. And then what they did wrong is they let the cartels take over to the point where they'll kill everybody and anybody, and everybody's afraid to touch anything or say anything. So is it a good idea what Trump had? Kind of. Maybe he spoke from the heart a little too fast because you're not going to see anything happen. But they don't want him down there. The president said, "Oh no, we don't need your Marine Corps down there. It's okay." Well, yeah, you do, but you're not going to let them.
The problem with that is, I mean, the world as it exists today, as far as international diplomacy and international law, Mexico's a sovereign nation, right. And the minute we send troops across the border, good, bad, or indifferent, unless it's a black op, it's an act of war.
Right, exactly.
And so, I mean, I do.
So go with what you were going to say on the war on drugs now.
Well, give me one more second because
Okay.
I want to comment. I want to continue your thoughts there. So we saw it happen with the cartels in Medellin and Cali.
Yep.
The cops were powerless to do anything, right? It got worse. Cops were less powerful to do anything. It got worse. Cops lost what little power or influence they ever had, and the gangsters controlled the streets. Right. You see it in Brazil all over the place. I've worked with Brazilian cops. They're some of the best in the world. They're really professionals. But there's favelas, they call them favelas, in these neighborhoods in Brazil that are no-go zones for the cops because the bad guys control them. Huge ghettos that it's just not safe for a cop to go into. Cops get killed every day just crossing the line. So when you hear me rant and rave a little bit about the deterioration of law enforcement's ability to work in Baltimore or work in Chicago or work in L.A., that's the next logical step.
Right.
Is an absolute loss of control in those communities.
Look at Portland, Oregon. They're getting out of control already.
Well, and my kid lives out in West, and the cops don't try to control it. They're almost like the Amsterdam police. They just turn a blind eye to the problems, and if a fight breaks out, they'll intervene. If somebody steals something, they'll take them to jail. But the very permissive attitudes towards drug use and drug sales. No proactive activity towards the counter-narcotics mission at all. And that's my fear. If we start to lose control in these major metropolitan areas of these communities, there's no taking it back.
Right.
Right. Posse comitatus, the law against using American military against American citizens, precludes the use of our military to regain control. If the cops can't control it, you're not going to send 19-year-old National Guard kids in there to try to do something. Right. If we allow it to continue to deteriorate, what we're going to have is favelas in American cities.
Yeah.
If we allow the cartels here to take over the way the Mexican cartels allowed those to continue to propagate for the sake of fun and profit so that they line their pockets, we're going to have the same problem here. We're going to have gangsters controlling the streets, and there will be no coming back from that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
So, all right, so let's go to the war on drugs thing. I I think it was President Nixon that actually coined the term first. President Reagan used it a lot.
Nancy Reagan's was just say no.
Well,
That
yeah.
was her.
But here's my problem with the war on drugs. You fight a war with the intentions of an ultimate conclusion of confrontation.
Right.
With the idea that at some point somebody's going to win and it's
Right.
going to be over. The problem with drug trafficking, I'm not big on criminalization of drug use because, like you say, no matter what you do, a lot of times they don't have a choice. I think it needs to stay criminalized because it's the only way poor people can get access to drug treatment. They can't afford to buy it. So if we have court-ordered systems where these people are allowed, or drug treatment is facilitated, you can save 10%.
Right.
Maybe it's only 10%, but you can save 10. But the selling of drugs there's no war that's going to stop that. That's nothing more than predation on weaker people, just like, strong-arm robbery is a strong guy taking a poor guy's money.
Right,
Just like, elderly fraud, is someone outsmarting some old person and taking their money. Selling dope is nothing more than a form of predation. And it has to be criminalized in a civilized society because it's nothing more. It's
Pull your
not
mic closer.
Okay. It's nothing more than someone in a position of power preying on someone who's weak. And so there is no war on drugs. There's no cessation of this. We're not going to stop people preying on one another.
Right.
You're never going to solve the rape problem. You're never going to stop all murders. You're never going to stop all armed robberies. And you're never going to stop all drug trafficking. You just have to criminalize it and punish people who do it. The jails need to be filled with those people. There's a big outcry now because...
So it's a purposeful play on words to give a comfy feeling to people that making them think that there actually will...
It was supposed to be a rallying cry. President Reagan had the best of intentions when he used it. It was supposed to be a rallying cry, along with say no to drugs. But the fact of the matter is, human nature is such that people are going to, try to alter their state of mind with substances, right? Alcohol, pot, all these other things. And you have to punish the people who are the predators, the people who are propagating the problem, So that's my thing about the war on drugs. It's not a war. It never has been a war. It's a criminal justice problem in a civilized society. Predatory behavior.
Think that's where you're seeing now the local police trying to track down heroin dealers when someone overdoses and dies.
Absolutely.
Find out who he bought that from and go get that dealer and charge him with manslaughter or homicide.
I think that's a wonderful idea. And take it a step further. If somebody dies of a drug overdose from pills, indict the doctor that prescribed the medication.
Oh, they have.
Yeah.
Our drug diversion detective, I believe a sergeant now, not even sure if she's still working, Lisa. I don't want to say her last name on the air.
I understand. I know her, though. I know who you're talking about.
She's very dedicated.
Very good.
She got a Haitian doctor running a pill mill, 25 years in prison.
I think I know who it is also.
Yeah, she's the real deal. She's been around since I was on the street.
Yeah.
And
she's the best.
She really is the best.
I used to work with her all the time.
Lisa,
she was my
shout out if you're
undercover on
listening.
my drug deals.
Really?
When I was last doing some, yeah. She did the undercover stuff.
She's cool.
Yeah. So, Gary, with that being said, what do you think law enforcement's biggest obstacle is with this, with the opioid epidemic?
Social attitudes. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's a segment of the community out there that has a very permissive attitude towards drug use. And what I don't think they realize, this country was founded on civil liberties, right?
Right.
You should be allowed to do anything you want to up until the point where it encroaches on the welfare of someone else. That's what the Constitution basically boils down to.
Right.
People say that drug use is a choice that people should be allowed to make. People on the left, people with a more permissive attitude. They don't see it as Darwinism, which is what it is, right? It's the weak basically killing themselves off.
Right.
And people with the permissive attitudes towards civil liberties or permissive attitudes towards drug use say, well, that's okay until it's their kid.
Right.
Until it's their
Right.
husband or wife that goes out into the street. Then all of a sudden, why aren't the cops doing something? Because we're seen as the first line of defense.
Right.
When in fact, this is a very complex social issue, just like we were talking about with the pharmaceutical industry. You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't. I know nations where they advertise drug treatment, the police do, and the people who go in never come out.
Well, part of the problem with drug treatment down here, I only say down here because I live in Florida down here, but it's a pure moneymaker now.
Absolutely.
They don't, although if you go up north, you're going to see advertisements on TV. Oh, drug rehab in in Delray Beach. And they show all this beautiful stuff and the ocean, and it's like you're going on a vacation, and it's not like that at all, trust me.
Yeah. It's a scam.
And all they do, it's Lake Worth, Deerfield, or not, well, maybe Deerfield, Delray, all those places down there, they're all just,
well,
and now they're spreading out, into neighborhoods.
Oh, I know, yeah.
In the acreage.
Really?
There's homes out there that are drug rehabs.
Oh, I didn't know.
Halfway houses.
Yeah.
Half the guys that live in there are felons.
Yeah, a lot of local communities are having to combat what they call sober houses.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And all that is a landlord splitting a house up that shouldn't be subdivided so that 30 people can live in it.
So he can make money.
So he can make money off of it. And, here again, the question you have to ask yourself is what price are we willing to pay to save that 10%, right? If 10% is savable, what price are we willing to pay? But it's a complicated social issue. Law enforcement is not the only answer.
Right.
We're just one component of it. It has to be the medical community. It has to be a serious issue among the academics that solve social problems. And we have to have the political will to act on all levels if we're going to do anything to stop it.
Well, again, we're talking about the educational facilities, like we did last week, where we're talking about, people are making decisions that law enforcement officers shouldn't act on, minor offenses like drug and alcohol possession in the schools. I mean, that to me is it's going backwards.
It is, and that's exactly the problem, and it has been since the 60s. 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
But then how do you get control of that, Gary? I mean, you got the whole. Nobody in New York is in an uproar about this. I mean, there's not enough of. Are there really people that just say, "Yeah, we know it's not good, but you know what? He's our governor, and it's okay, so we're just going to do it." I mean, is that really?
They just passed a law in New York dropping the bond on dozens of charges, from everything from raping a minor to criminal homicide to minor things like trespassing or whatever. I'll show you a prime.
And that's why I said, how do you?
Well, we don't have the political will. We there's a school of thought.
And I'm afraid that what's going to happen is what you said about. I forgot
about messing up the mics again.
Continued deterioration of the
society. Yeah, when the cops start to.
It's the first step in the fall of Western civilization.
Yeah.
I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but the truth of the matter is, there's a segment. Listen to the Democratic debates, right? It's Elizabeth Warren, and I don't want to get into politics. I consider myself as financially conservative, socially responsible. I'm an Eisenhower Republican. But Ms. Warren wants to decriminalize crime. She wants to say, okay, well, there's a kinder, gentler way of dealing with people, with the predators in society. We'll come up with ways to make less predators, and so society will get better.
Until she gets robbed.
I don't see that ending well.
Well, maybe it just has to happen to show that it doesn't end well. But then, like you said, we can never get that back.
What do you have next?
Here you go.
You never get that back again.
An alleged Bronx drug dealer facing nearly 100 years behind bars, gave Governor Cuomo a glowing endorsement on Thursday when he walked free as the courts tried to get a jump on state bail reform law set to take effect in January 1. Cuomo for president, Jose Catano, Jorge crowned in Spanish as he left Manhattan Supreme Court without plunking down a penny in bail. Jorge, 47, had been held without bail while facing up to 96 years on charges of selling controlled substance and conspiracy, but he can now walk the streets for the duration of his trial. If he even shows up, that is.
I was going to say, then Viva Cuomo, hasta luego. I'll see you later.
Yep.
Come to Mexico City to get me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the whole problem is we put them in the position. We vote for them. We put them in position.
Somebody does.
I'm just talking in general. I don't want to get into the politics thing, but we all do. We all vote for people that sometimes we just want to scream.
Well, let's talk.
But we
about
do
that.
that.
Let's talk about that for a minute.
Here's what we were talking about a second ago. It says authorities have accused Jorge, of having peddled the drugs tied to the fatal overdose of a 28-year-old man at York Avenue Diner. Jorge was busted in a sting that authorities said set up after allegedly linking him to fentanyl heroin found at the scene. Ugh. And he just walked out.
So let me comment. I'm going to say something about that that's a little maybe inappropriate. You remember back in the day when you were working that North District, and it's just you and two other guys controlling the county? Well, we'd get a guy coming through town that we were a little concerned might not be the best of residents, and we didn't. Our job was to protect Deerfield.
So you gave him the Hobo Express to my area.
And my theory was you may not be able to stop crime, but you can damn sure relocate it. And so we'd do a 1014 as we went back in the day and drop them off there at 54th and Federal and point them southbound, right? This bail thing, as bad as it is, because, I think it's just foolishness. If nothing else, maybe Jorge will go back to Mexico and we won't have to see him again for a while, because if he comes to the United States, he knows he's facing 96 years.
Yeah, maybe.
Relocate the crime. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, in talking about the medical field and everything, what about mental illness?
It's a joke between me and him.
Inside joke, yeah.
Okay.
It's the old days. We're just celebrating the old days.
I'm just glad I have somebody old, couple of guys older than me who could say the old days, and I could still feel like just a couple of years younger.
You're the young'un in the room. You're the youngster.
Okay, what about mental illness? Do you see over-medicating as a contributor to this epidemic? In other words, it's easy to just say, okay, yeah, he's mentally ill, let's give him these drugs, make sure you take them, prescribe them, and send them on their way. What about?
I think that's a great correlation to this current discussion. So in the 60s, it really became, the medical theory was you can't lock someone up for a mental illness, right? You can't incarcerate somebody just because they're mentally ill. So they opened up the asylums and said, unless the person commits criminal conduct, you can't incarcerate them. Well, they wound up homeless, and they wound up, vagrants, and because if they're not medicated, if they don't have access to the necessary medication, then they have problems, particularly bipolar and issues like that.
Right.
So we did come up with these outpatient treatment programs where people could, if they chose to, go seek their medication and try to function normally in society. The problem is when they go off their meds, we've all worked calls where they did.
Yeah.
And then the police have to intervene.
Right.
One of the leading causes of recidivist occupation in local jails is people with mental health problems who have no other way to get their meds, right? So they go back into BSO and the nurse pulls their rap sheet. They've been in there 30 times before, and she just reissues the meds, and a couple of days later the judge releases them. I don't know how to solve that issue, because it's a good example of what happens if we don't deal with a problem. All we did was shift who was responsible for that.
Right.
And we're doing the same thing with the drug issue, right? There's a deep problem particularly in our urban areas or in rural America with the hillbilly heroin and the pills. We're blaming the wrong people. And we're not, it's not the cops' fault that the situation has gone so bad. It's the drug dealer's fault, It's not it's the doctor who prescribes medication, 1,000 pills of oxy, to a patient that's, had a minor injury,
Right.
We've got to...
Or just claims to have an injury.
Or just claims to have an injury. We've got to take a straight-faced, honest look at what the problem is and deal with it intelligently. The politicians are all... I want to digress into politics for just a second, because we've become so divided in this country, right? And it's got to the point where if I'm on one side, nothing the other side is acceptable, right? Our politicians, we can't pass anything in Congress because regardless of who has the White House, the other side
resists.
Right. And that's not governance.
Right.
That's not what we pay them for, but that's the state of affairs. And we've all got our news channel from which we get our news, and the talking heads tell us what we should think, and then we reiterate that in the echo chamber of social media. At some point, we got to say, you know what, I disagree with your politics, but we can still talk out a problem, right? And whether it's drug addiction or mental health treatment or, how to get the bridge down the road fixed, we've got to take control of our country again as constituents, because as a republic, we're beginning to fail.
As a knee-jerk reaction to the drug problem, the politicians have passed laws trying to fix the problem, but what they've done is they've hurt the guy, the average Joe, who goes and gets a hip replacement operation, and they give him 3 medicated pain pills. You'll be fine. That guy's going to be in pain for at least 10 days, and you give him 3 pills. Why? Well, we can't give you any more than that because that's, And then the guy that wants them, that doesn't really need them, that guy I was talking to at dinner tonight, he's the guy getting them all.
Exactly. And that's the problem. That we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah. Instead of solving the problem, which is the illicit distribution not medically necessary, because the guy with the hip operation, he's not going to be able to get the medication he needs.
And my mind went blank. What do you know? Holy Jesus!
Get Gary his Alzheimer's medication real quick.
It happens to me every day. So, yeah, we're all in
my
the
mind
same
just
boat.
went blank.
I agree, Gary. I agree. Whatever it was, I agree. But no, but
I know.
Okay.
The South Florida State Hospital problem. What he's saying,
and that's what I was just going to say.
Mentally ill guys, we have to charge them with a crime when they commit a crime.
Right.
It's up to the state to drop the charge or not drop the charge, which we know they're going to do it anyway. But that's beside the point. It's up to them to do that part. Right. We put them in there, and the nurse gives them the medication thing. But the real problem is we used to have South Florida State Hospital, like we talked about before. They don't have that anymore. We used to have that in Pembroke Pines, and a lot of the mentally ill people would go there. I don't know if the state just didn't want to spend the money anymore, which is probably it.
That's what it came
but
down to.
That's gone now.
It doesn't help.
And now we have nowhere to put all these Baker Acts and all these people. And you know what? Here's the worst part. Like the kid that shot up Parkland, or another kid. You know what? You hear these people say, well, why didn't you get him help? Well, what's wrong with you, Mom? How come you didn't get him help? Because there is no help. That's why. Yeah. Because she can't afford to send him for mental health evaluation because she ain't got the money.
Right.
She doesn't have the resources.
Right.
And
I'm so sick of hearing that. Well, why didn't she just get him help? Oh, well, why didn't you say so? I got a phone. What's that number again?
Well, even the cops can't do anything. Even if you detect behavior that's of grave concern to you about a young person's intentions to do violence, unless you can articulate,
Right.
A Baker Act, articulate in a probable cause affidavit that they're a harm to themselves or others. And then what do they get? They get hospitalization for 3 days, evaluation, and they get turned right back out on the street. And that's when they
which is exactly what we were just talking about, and that's what you.
And you know that guy that I shot and killed in Pompano in 1981, 80. He he's funny. His problem was that's exactly it. He was violent. They Baker acted him for 3 days, gave him these pills, said, "Here you go. Take these, you'll be fine." Well, of course, he didn't take the pills, and I ended up having to shoot and kill the guy.
Right.
I didn't shoot and kill the guy. The state of Florida shot and killed that guy.
Yeah, and that's why I said it doesn't help when they're taking tools away from us, like South Florida State Hospital. There's no, it's a revolving door.
It absolutely is.
And it's doing nothing but hurting these people. It's not helping these people. It doesn't help them that you take them in for 3 days, you give them an evaluation, you give them a prescription and say, okay, go take. There's got to be continued help for them. Like, let them go to the state hospital.
South Florida State Hospital used to have a whole wing just for the criminally insane.
Yes, it did. And they got treatment, they got tended to. Well,
and you raise a really interesting issue. Let me take off of that and segue off with the drug problem, okay, and bringing it all home. We were talking about how the mental illness issue relates to the addiction issue.
Right.
Now they're basically decriminalizing drug addiction and drug sales, and they're tying our hands from an enforcement capacity under the premise that, well, we'll treat it as a medical issue. We'll administer, methadone, and we'll, the medical community can take care of them. Well, that's not happened with it's never happened with the mental illness problem, which is a relatively small per capita issue relative to the number of people who are addicted to drugs.
Right.
There's no way in the world that the medical community can deal with drug addiction as a medical issue alone.
And a lot of the homeless people are now drug addicts as well.
Absolutely.
They didn't used to be, but they are now.
Right.
Many of them are.
Drug addiction leads to homelessness. It costs you everything, whether it's crack, meth, heroin. It doesn't matter.
I know guys that have sold their family men who got into a car accident or got hurt, didn't become an addict because he just decided he was going to start taking drugs, got pain pills or whatever, got hooked on it. He ended up selling his car out from under his family to get drugs. And I know that because I met him at the airport when he came down here to go to Delray Beach to get drug rehab, his last chance.
I know two policemen who got in work-related car accidents. The doctor said, well, here's a note. Stay home and watch daytime TV for a couple of weeks. And, oh, by the way, here's a script for 50 oxys, right? Cost them their jobs, cost them their families, cost them their reputation, cost them everything.
Yep.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And then it's one big circle, like you said. And you can't treat drug addiction like a medical condition, which you're absolutely...
You can't do it. That can't be the only solution.
Yeah.
There has to be a holistic, whole society agreement that this is a problem for us as a nation, and we're going to deal with it. And
but is it too late, Gary? I mean, look how far gone.
It goes back to the 10% thing. If you can save 10%, save 10%. If Darwinism is going to claim 90% and there's nothing we can do about it, we as a society still have to try.
Right.
We have no choice.
And then now we go back to when you mentioned your concern about who would take control if law enforcement gets disempowered. So if law enforcement gets disempowered, what are the dangers faced by law enforcement if we don't get control of it?
Well, there used to be a bumper sticker when we were young I saw on cars that said, those who don't like policemen had best be prepared to make friends with their criminals. So if the cops aren't controlling the streets, the thugs are going to control the streets. And how big and bad and out of hand that gets,
there'd be nothing left but the wolves and the sheep.
Anybody guess? Yeah, exactly. And and I always like to look to history and other nations. We like to think as Americans that it can't happen here.
Yeah.
Right? Society won't deteriorate here.
I can
because we're
see where it's
Americans.
going to happen here.
Right. Well, all you have to do is look at other nations. Look at the Soviet Union in '89, right? Everybody lived off the state. They had a system. They were a world power one day. And then the next day, there were no pensions. There were no laws. There were no rules. People were starving in the streets. And that's when you saw the oligarchy begin to take control. And oligarchy
That's when you saw the Russian mafia take over.
Right. That's just
They would literally walk into a bank on the corner and tell the guy in the president's chair, I'm now your boss. I own the bank. And if he said no, the next day when he left his apartment, he was gunned down in the street. And then they went to the vice president the next day and said, I'm your new partner. I'm taking over this bank. And he said, have my chair. Everything's fine. And that's exactly how it happened. I know that for a fact.
And you can, because you worked Russian organized crime, you know what it is.
Exactly.
And I worked it enough to know you're absolutely right. But there's other smaller nations that have existed.
And so with the Russian organized crime, tied to major drug and...
Well, ultimately, yeah. But you think about the situation in '89, like we were talking about in the green room. Everything was for sale in '89. I mean, they were selling submarines to the Colombian cartels,
so they could transport drugs.
Yeah.
A real submarine. They wanted to sell a real submarine.
There was a story.
cartel.
There was a story just recently in the news about a submarine off the coast somewhere.
Well, they make their own now.
Where they emptied.
Yeah, the Colombians have been making.
They
their
got
own
enough
for
money
years.
to make their own
Exactly.
submarines.
Exactly. They bring in the naval engineers.
That's crazy.
And the fact of the matter is, world-class subs. I've got buddies that are working in Colombia right now. That's their sole job is chasing submersibles.
Wow.
But back to the thing about. Now I'm having a senior moment. I can't remember what I was going to say. No, I mean, but you don't have to look too far back into history to see other places where they thought it was going to be fine, and then one day it wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? And it becomes anarchy, as you guys like to say.
And it happens fast.
I hate to think that can. I mean, I'm not saying it can't. I just hate the thought that we can even think that would happen here.
I would think that there's going to be enough states who are going to say, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that.
Right.
But then when you get states like Oregon that wants to just, I mean, when the mayor tells the police, stand down, leave them alone, and they stand there and watch Antifa beat the hell out of a journalist and don't do anything about it because the mayor told them to stand down.
Yeah.
Well, that's the only thing that'll save us is the fact that we have states' rights and individual entities, political entities will continue to stand. I think this is a complicated.
Do you think for one second that shit will go on in Arkansas, where I grew up? I don't think so.
No, yeah.
Hell no.
Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, we're not there yet. But we are lying to ourselves if we say it can't happen here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying it can. I just hate to think that. Because our kids have to deal with it. Our kids are going to have to deal with that, and it's just.
Yeah, I won't cite the historical examples that come to mind immediately, but there's plenty of historical examples of, one day it was fine and the next day it wasn't.
Well, you look at Congress. We have an anti-Semite in Congress right now. I mean, they have a
Let's
whole
not go
bunch
there.
of radicals.
Let's not go there.
That are,
Let's.
I'm just telling the truth.
Danny's going to be blowing a gasket in a second here.
Abort.
But it was a good talk. I had a very, very good talk today. It was a lot of informative. You have anything you want to elaborate on, particularly before we
maybe just wrap it up. I mean, the bottom line is, the drug addiction problem in this country has always been a whole community problem. It requires the cooperation of the medical community. It requires law enforcement. It requires the courts, and it requires the politicians to take it seriously. And our enemies aren't just within. The Mexican cartels should be designated as terrorist organizations. I've got one of my former bosses that's lobbying for that in a big way.
That's the only way that will
and he's got
ever
some
get cleared
power.
up.
And we need to treat them the same way we do, Al-Qaeda or ISIS or anybody else. They're terrorist organizations, and they're right across the street.
Right.
And we better finish the wall.
And any one of
the
those...
reason I'm saying we better finish the wall is because I've seen videos, you've seen videos, I'm sure you have too, of the drug cartels right across the border murdering and torturing and keeping people alive and cutting them all up and doing brutal, vicious
some
things.
of those videos are
And
pretty
guess
grotesque.
what?
I mean,
they
it's-
just have to walk across the border and they're here.
Yeah.
So Arizona, do you want these guys in your house?
You know,
No wonder the sheriffs on the
There's-
border down
there's-
there are crying for so much help.
There's no way we're going to 100% stop it, but to slow it down and stuff, yeah, I mean, but my question was going to be to you when you were talking about the medical, the government, the police, everything. Any one of those, in your view, any one of those cogs missing, does it work? Or
No, I mean, like I say, it's a holistic thing. The educational institutions have to be dedicated to educating the kids about the dangers. Like I say, you wouldn't think about letting your kid out of the house without teaching them how to cross the street without looking for cars.
Right.
This is an imminent threat to every young person who goes through the school system here. Schools have to be involved. The medical community has to be involved. The police have to be involved. Politicians have to put money where it counts. Whether it's but we all have to be in this together, or it's just going to get worse.
I agree.
Yep.
And on that note, Danny's going to be happy about this, right, Danny?
It's about time.
One other thing, guys.
Oh, wait,
Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed this. It's been great. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you coming. It was very informative. I thought it was a really good talk. I have a feeling we can talk all through the night.
We could.
Especially, you bringing up old times and all that other stuff. And certain
We might have to have you back,
But you're more than welcome to come. I know it's a long trip.
When you're down here already.
And I know you're very busy and stuff back and forth with Miami and stuff like that. You're very busy. He's a private investigator. I'm sure you want to give out any information if anybody ever needs to contact you for anything or anything.
My practice is built on basically supporting the legal community. I do any kind of civil litigation. I don't do family law. I stay way clear of that. But generally speaking, I'm a problem solver for people. If they just call me up, we'll analyze their problems and see what can be done. So
Excellent.
You can find me on Google Business, Gary S. Coffman.
Awesome.
That's my pitch.
And your books are on
Amazon.com.
Yes, they are.
Also, Gary S. Kaufman.
Yes. Great. Again, thanks, Gary. I really appreciate it. I really do. So.
My pleasure.
My book's on
The Nightstand.
Nothing. Yeah, The Nightstand.
Okay.
I was going to write a book once about all the years inside of BSO and all the.
I have a book about. Honest to God, I have a book 3/4 of the way done. I just haven't been able to finish the last quarter of it yet.
That's because you don't know what I know about.
Maybe
But I never did do it. I should have.
It's hard work.
It really is.
Yeah.
It is. Okay. I want to remind everyone, Copservations is broadcast live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Copservation Facebook page, the Copservations YouTube channel, and the Copservations Twitter page. Did you know that? At Copservations _.
I did.
So I want you to keep following us now. I want some reviews, likes, and
Wait till we're on iHeartRadio.
Absolutely.
yeah, that's coming. So we got a lot of stuff that we're working on. So we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we're gonna wrap things up. So stick around. We'll be right back.
How to know if you should reach out to a friend. Your friend might be
Worried, sad,
Grumpy, angry,
stressed, weird, rebellious,
anxious, antisocial,
lonely,
sleeping less,
sleeping more,
eating less,
eating more.
Look, there are a lot of things to watch out for, but you know your friend best. So if they're not acting themselves, why not say something? Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org. Awkward.
The black truck. Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzzed and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So, yeah, I know. That's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
To talk to our host, call the podcast studio toll-free at 888-511-COPS. That's 888-511-2677. Now back to our host.
Welcome back to Copservations. The discussion tonight has been law enforcement's battle with drugs and the addiction epidemic. And there was a call from my house here just a few seconds ago, but I guess they hung up on me. They must not have wanted to talk. Hope everything's all right. Honey, I hope everything's all
probably
right.
didn't realize the show wasn't off.
Yeah. Aria, it was probably Aria. No, because they called the podcast line.
Oh.
So it might have been my granddaughter wanted to say hello. Hi, Ari. Papa loves you.
Oh, brother.
Okay, so anyway, I'd like to thank our guest, Gary Coffman, for joining us tonight. Gary, thank you so much. I know we thanked you enough already, but
thank you.
It was a pleasure. I know it was a long trip. I really appreciate you making it. I hope you come back and join us again another day.
Absolutely.
Because it was definitely a lot of fun. Thank you, Danny, for staying late. Tell Shirley I said I'll tell Shirley. I'm sorry, Shirley, that we kept Danny so late tonight. Danny's got a bedtime, so he's got to... Just kidding. No, you can't say anything. So anyway, as always, before we sign off, we'd like to honor our fallen brothers and sisters. Tonight we honor Officer Joe Douglas Spears of the Gulfport Police Department in Gulfport, Mississippi, whose end of watch was on this day, November 21st, back in 1971. Officer Spears was shot and killed by a female prisoner that he and another officer were transporting to jail. The prisoner had been arrested by the other officer on that morning for drunk driving. Officer Spears had responded to the scene to drive the subject's car back to the police station. After administering a field sobriety test at the station, the two officers began to transport the woman to jail. The woman had been handcuffed in the front because of her large size. Approximately 1 block from the station, the officer driving the transport vehicle looked back and observed the woman holding a pistol that she was able to conceal on her person while being arrested. She shot Officer Spears, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, in the head. After a brief struggle, the second officer was able to subdue the woman. Officer Spears was transported to a local hospital where he succumbed to his wounds during surgery later that evening. His murderer pled guilty to murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Officer Spears was a United States Navy veteran and had been awarded 2 Purple Heart medals during a tour in Vietnam. At the time, he was survived by his expectant wife, mother, 2 sisters, and 4 brothers. Officer Spears had only served 1 year and 5 months with the department, and he was only 23 years old.
Jesus.
Hey, Copservation fans, got a show idea or a topic you'd like to hear discussed? Instant message the show on the Copservation Facebook page, or you can email our producers directly at copservations@yahoo.com. If you'd like to appear as a guest on the show, you can send your request to schedule an appearance by clicking the Book Now button on our Copservation Facebook page. And we'll get back to you with final arrangements if you just send us a little message. And as a reminder, you can tune into this podcast every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the Copservation Facebook page, Copservation YouTube channel, and Copservation Twitter page. Don't forget, we're off next week for the Thanksgiving holiday, so I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Gary, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. To you as well.
Great. Hope you guys have great holidays, too. We'll be back. What we're going to do is we're going to resume our regular broadcasting probably in the next couple of weeks. We're not really sure yet because we have Thanksgiving coming up, and we have a lot of planning to do with the advancement of the show and different other media venues and stuff like that. So keep checking back. We'll let you know on the Facebook page when we're going to be back, and hopefully it won't be too long. And hopefully Rob will be back. Right?
Hopefully.
Rob.
Come back, Rob.
You're coming. What? You don't like me?
You bum ya.
I have more fun in there anyway.
You schmuck, take a chicken.
I can't wait. I can't wait to get me and Danny on the mics talking to you guys. How you like that? Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe and God bless you.